Chapter 365. The Iron Golem. As the name suggested, it was a humanoid construct made of steel. The Iron Golem was usually 12 feet, about 365 meters, high and weighed about 5,000 pounds, about 2,268 kilograms. The Iron Golem had a humanoid body made of steel. The surface of their bodies was smooth and dazzling, and the metal shell was etched with dense rune lines and patterns. In order to better protect the internal control center and energy center, the chest of the Iron Golem was unusually broad. Their attack and defense were mainly completed by the giant tower shield in their left hand and the giant metal sword in their right hand. Once these weapons were damaged, it would be terrifying if they swung their iron fists to hit people. Creating a golem puppet was undoubtedly a demanding job. The cost was considerable, the process was rigorous, the requirements were strict, and it took a long time. It required a large amount of money, sophisticated consumables, and the cooperation of several or even dozens of wizards and apprentices. In the final stage of assembly and activation, there must be a high-grade wizard who was proficient in construct activation. With so many harsh conditions, this thing became a money-burning item that only large-scale magus organizations could afford to play with. Without the support of a huge wizard tower's energy pool and income, such an Iron Golem legion would be difficult to form. But today, this group of witches and apprentices who were inexplicably brought here had to fight such a terrible Iron Legion. At this moment, their hearts almost collapsed. With the weak witchcraft attack power of the witch apprentices, it was impossible to penetrate the thick, all-metal magic-resistant body of the Iron Golem. No matter how many defensive spells or force fields they cast on their frail bodies, they would not be able to withstand the slashes of the opponent's heavy greatswords. How could such a battle be carried out? Almost before the battle began, the witches and apprentices had completely lost confidence. However, there was no chance to surrender or escape on such a battlefield, so the witches and apprentices reluctantly raised their spirits and began to work together to defend and protect themselves. They could clearly see that there were no signs of the three fated ones in their group. This also meant that they had reinforcements outside of this special scene. Although the other side could not help them wholeheartedly, as long as the other side did not want the hidden guy to win, then destroying the enemy's slaughter plan was undoubtedly a very cost-effective choice. This thought was the only thing that kept the awakened ones from collapsing. The entire arena was 200 meters wide and 500 meters long. It was more than enough to accommodate a lot of people. However, in the face of the great steel wall, the witches' activity space was undoubtedly greatly limited, and they could only occupy nearly a third of the arena. And as the Iron Man army marched forward in unison, this space was still slowly shrinking. "Hold them off! Hold them off! We can't let them go any further!" a witch screamed. "Everyone who has mastered the swamp spell and quicksand spell, throw them at their feet." With someone taking command, the team, which was in a mess just now, immediately had a backbone. Amidst the violent elemental turbulence, gray light rays and halos fell on the feet of the first row of iron golems. The ground of the arena was made of rough and solid dark soil, which did not have any magic resistance, so the witches' and apprentices' first wave of attacks immediately took effect. Under the effect of witchcraft, the dark soil almost instantly turned into soft quicksand and stinking swamps filled with sludge and rotting liquid. The first row of iron golems was still moving forward with difficulty, but their thick metal legs were stuck in the swamp and could not be pulled out. Under the pressure of their huge weight, they sank deeper and deeper, and in the blink of an eye, nearly half of their bodies were submerged in the mud. It seemed that someone was controlling them from behind. The second row of iron golems actually stopped at the edge of the witchcraft swamp. They hung the giant metal sword in their right hands back to their waists, and then pulled out short metal spears from their backs. "Get ready to dodge, be careful of the spears," the witches immediately shouted at the top of their lungs. But the next moment, their voices were covered by the sharp sound of spears piercing through the air. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, 10 1-meter-long metal spears with the thickness of an egg whistled through the air, and with terrifying power, they pierced into the temporary team of witches and apprentices. Although the tactics were crude and the attack simple, the effect was extremely good. 2 witches who could not dodge in time were pierced by the metal spears and nailed to the ground alive. Although they did not die immediately, the pierced thighs or shoulders made them unable to move. They endured the severe pain and desperately called for help, but the few apprentices who rushed over could not do anything to the metal spears that were nearly half buried in the mud. And just when they were in a panic, a witch apprentice's scream made everyone's heart suddenly tighten. "Be careful! They are still throwing." This time, it was not just the second row. The third row of iron golems also changed their weapons to metal spears, and this time, they threw 20 spears, whoosh whoosh whoosh. After the more intense sound of breaking through the air, the slightly panicked witches became a pot of porridge. With the witches' defensive means, it was difficult for such a simple physical attack to break their defensive witchcraft, but the apprentices obviously could not reach this level. Therefore, in the dense storm of metal spears, the witches became the biggest victims. In addition to an unlucky person who died on the spot after his skull was pierced, 7 witches had been pierced by the metal spears and nailed to the ground one after another. And everywhere in the field was their painful wails and cries for help. Such a scene was undoubtedly a great stimulation and torture for the witches, who were not injured for the time being. They panicked and ran around, took out various magic items of different shapes, and desperately blessed themselves with defensive witchcraft that could resist physical attacks. "We can't just be beaten here," the witch with a gloomy face shouted. Fight back quickly, use all your means, fight back quickly." Under her shouts, the witches and apprentices immediately started chanting witchcraft incantations loudly, and took out plant seeds or strange beast bones from their bosoms to cast spells. After a few flicks of their fingers, the witches' counterattack fell on the iron golems 20 meters away. As soon as the plant seeds fell to the ground, they drilled into the ground. After a moment, as the earth cracked and dust flew, vines and plant roots as thick as a child's arm stretched out from the ground, like giant snakes, and coiled around the iron golems. Hiss, with a strange hissing sound, the tender shoots on the plant roots quickly twisted into a ball, forming a strange green mouth, and crazily gnawed on the metallized bodies of the iron golems. While gnawing, the green mouth flowed with sticky rotten liquid, which fell on the metal bodies of the iron golems and emitted traces of corrosive green smoke. While the green summoned creatures and the iron golems were entangled, bone spikes that were as dense as locusts rained down on them. Clang, 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 the sharp bone spikes exploded on the sturdy body of the iron golem, shattering into bone fragments that filled the sky. Unfortunately, apart from leaving white marks, they did not cause any visible surface damage to the iron golems. The magic iron alloy used to cast the iron golems had an outstanding defense effect, and ordinary witchcraft and attacks could not hurt them at all. Only a more powerful witchcraft or a super strong physical attack that exceeded the upper limit of their defense could possibly destroy them. Almost none of the witches and apprentices had these. However, the creeping monsters that drilled in all directions caused some confusion among the iron golems. Seeing the monsters made of catalyzed plants fighting against the iron golems, the fiery scene was so intense that it almost made one's breath stop. With the creeping monsters' antics and the witches' joint attack, 3 iron golems had fallen one after another with black smoke rising from their bodies. Thus, the witches who had tasted the sweetness immediately summoned more elemental creatures and summoned creatures. Even if they could not effectively kill the iron golems, they tried their best to disrupt the enemy's formation. Just as the first 3 rows of iron golems fell into chaos, the last 2 rows of iron golems unexpectedly turned to the left and right sides, bypassing the swamp area and continuing to attack. As for the metal spears, they were continuously thrown at the area occupied by the witches. Separated by a small swamp that was less than 20 meters wide, the two sides attacked each other with all their might. He ran with all his strength, panting, and chanting witchcraft incantations in a trembling voice. He threw acid balls at the joints of the iron golems in the distance, and then tried his best to dodge the metal javelins that came at him with sharp whistling sounds. In the narrow space of less than 130 square meters, more than 50 witches and apprentices dodged the attacks and fought back with all their might. Everyone was busy. At their feet and beside them, apprentices fell one after another, their bodies pierced by one or two heavy short spears that were as thick as eggs. In the midst of this chaos, a mysterious girl with a thin figure in a black robe was strangely wandering in the bloody and cruel battlefield. It was very strange, really very strange. The chaos of the battlefield formed a sharp contrast with her calmness. Everything seemed so out of place. However, she still calmly walked beside the witch apprentice who was running and crying at full speed. Suddenly, she stopped and squatted beside a witch apprentice whose right shoulder was nailed to the ground by a metal spear. The witch apprentice, who was struggling in pain but unable to get rid of the shackles, had already screamed hoarsely. The huge dark blood swamp covered her body, and she had no strength to call for help. It was not until the girl's figure blocked the strong dazzling light that the dying witch apprentice could barely open her eyes and see the girl. She had a slender figure, a thin and beautiful face, and the eyebrows on her face could not be seen clearly against the strong background light. But Roland's gentle smile and charisma made people want to get close to her, so the witch apprentice could only tremble and let out her last whimper to her. Save me. I don't want to die." Her words were so intermittent that it was enough to show that her life was about to be completely exhausted. She was already on the verge of death. The mysterious girl stretched out her crystal-clear and holy palm, covered her eyes and softly whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, I'm here." However, the next second, the dying witch apprentice's body shook, and her eyes, which had lost all their strength, suddenly opened to the extreme, shooting out a complex light of resentment, anger, and confusion. But after a moment, with the last of her life, all the light in her eyes disappeared. Chapter 366. The battle was still going on. The mysterious girl was like an invisible person that no one could see, wandering alone on the chaotic battlefield like the Grim Reaper. She did not turn invisible, nor did she cast any protective spells. With such a fragile and thin body, any metal spear could take her life. As for those apprentices who were running around randomly, they would only need to bump into her lightly to cause her serious injuries. Unfortunately, there was no pity. It was as if everything was in her calculations, or as if someone had cast a group suggestion spell in the hearts of all the witches and apprentices. Everyone turned a blind eye to such a strange girl. It was as if she was just a background, just a piece of transparent air. And wherever she went, it was the moment when the seriously injured and dying witch apprentices were on the verge of death. A thin body, a simple robe, and an ordinary dagger without any witchcraft, but it had taken the lives of 5 witch apprentices. In the minds of all the witches and apprentices, they still thought that these apprentices had died of natural loss of blood. They had never expected that there would be a terrifying god of death wandering around them, silently paying a visit to every life on the brink of despair. Under the control and command of the mysterious girl, the iron golems had the power to destroy the witches in one fell swoop, but they were like a group of the most stupid iron lumps. They would either fight with them across a short section of quicksand swamp, or they would bypass the obstacles and rush into the crowd in groups of 2s or 3s. Their fighting skills were simply wonderful. All the witches and apprentices who were knocked down or knocked down by them were only injured, which greatly facilitated the mysterious girl's harvesting work. The powerful iron golems were like a noose around the witches' necks, only tightening little by little, but they would not force them to a dead end or kill them all at once. After all, the iron golems were only following the orders of the mysterious girl according to the tower's authority, and they were not really her contracted creatures. So the witches and apprentices killed by the iron golems could not be counted as the mysterious girl's fault. The power of destiny of those who were accidentally killed by the iron golems would be absorbed by the entire tower and gathered at the core of the tower. The mysterious girl couldn't intercept any of it. This was the most fundamental reason why she had deliberately created such a strange atmosphere, constantly letting the witches bleed, so that she would have the opportunity to kill them with her own hands. Unfortunately, the strength of the witches was obviously much higher than that of the apprentices, and even higher than her. So far, the 11 witches were still only injured and not dead. Not a single one had died under the mysterious girl's vicious dagger. The mysterious girl obviously did not dare to get too close to these awakened witches. After all, if any of them raised their destiny energy to 10 points or above through slaughter, they would be able to detect her presence. Moreover, her body was too fragile and could not withstand any witchcraft attack. She could not guarantee that she could escape the witch-level awaken's counterattack before her death. So the mysterious girl could only slowly wander around the periphery of the witches, using the most secretive means to harvest the spoils of war, bit by bit. However, when she leisurely walked behind a witch apprentice who was crouching on the ground and panting heavily, the mysterious girl suddenly turned her face and looked somewhere in the distant space. A new enemy had arrived. Without the slightest hesitation, the mysterious girl's body turned around and disappeared from the arena. The witch apprentice, who was seriously exhausted and had almost lost all her vigilance, suddenly turned around and looked at the empty space behind her in confusion. Just now, she vaguely felt a trace of cold aura approaching her side, but it suddenly disappeared. If it wasn't for the fact that this feeling was so clear, she was afraid that she would not have noticed it in the midst of a fierce battle. Damn it, did someone really sneak up on me just now? When the witch apprentice thought of this, she felt goosebumps all over her body, and waves of fear made her almost unable to take a step forward. In a vast and huge hall, in the empty space, more than 50 witches and apprentices were scattered in the central area, lying, standing, or running. There were no enemies or foreign objects around them, but they were all desperately attacking and defending, as if they were fiercely fighting with some invisible creature. From time to time, an apprentice would fall to the ground in a miserable cry. There were no wounds on her body, but she was constantly screaming in pain, and her mental fluctuations and life aura continued to decline. But this was not the only strange thing. In this vast space of nearly 1,000 square meters, there were no magic facilities or rune props, only complicated and precise rune lines, magic hubs, and witchcraft symbols densely covering the walls, floor, and sky of the huge space. A strange blue glare filled the entire space, immersing the hall, the witches, and the apprentices in a blue sea of light. Everyone was fighting fiercely in the illusion, but in reality, they did not activate any witchcraft, nor did they move their bodies half a step out. As for the Iron Golem Legion? Come on, after thousands of years of erosion, the entire Tower of Destiny that could still maintain normal operations added up to less than 30 puppet guard. Although the Iron Golems were only living beings, and did not have the restrictions of human life, after thousands of years of erosion, it was enough to make them unable to move. Although their steel bodies would not rot, the rune lines and energy hubs in their bodies could not be like magic iron alloys that would never rust. The living souls in the control center had not been maintained and nourished for thousands of years, and had long disappeared. Although the construct puppets were known to be immortal, they also had a life. The mysterious girl left the light illusion, turned around, and left the hall. Just as she opened the stone door and entered the passage, she heard a loud rumbling sound in the distance. Listening to the sounds, it seemed like a powerful demolition team was rushing over, tearing down every house they came across. I can't let those strong competitors interfere with my harvest. I'll find some enemies for them. With these empty thoughts in mind, the mysterious girl silently pondered and casually pulled out a beautiful tarot card from the floating beside her. With the activation of this tarot card, the other tarot cards became dim again and slowly disappeared into the void. Thus, the strange tarot card floating in front of the mysterious girl began to slowly flip, revealing its own card. It was a small arcana card, and on the card was an extremely ugly, dark skeleton-like construct. At the corner of the card, there were 2 small runes silently shining there. The mysterious girl obviously recognized this witchcraft rune that contained high-level occult knowledge and represented the word shadow steel. When the mysterious girl softly read its name and lit it up with her finger, this special tarot card also mysteriously disappeared on the spot. In the next second, 4 strange black shadows drilled out of the shadow under the mysterious girl's body. The shadow steel golem was a medium-sized construct creature with the strength of an elite wizard. It was a silent and powerful guardian made entirely of a metal mind and forged in the shadow plane. The shadow steel golem looked like a kind of undead creature because they had a gloomy appearance and moved as quietly as a ghost. Unlike other constructs, the shadow steel golem was very good at hiding itself and could freely blend into any blurry shadow. A shadow steel golem was about 7 feet, about 2 or 13 meters, tall and weighed 1,500 pounds, about 680 kilograms, although it usually floated as if it was weightless. From the outside, this 7-foot-tall dark construct seemed to be made of a non-smooth black metal that seemed to be able to absorb light. Mist filled the hollow space between the skeletons, and the ends of the 2 skeleton-like arms were sharp metal claws. A gloomy, skull-shaped head was installed on its wide torso, but this construct did not seem to have a neck. It moved slowly and noiselessly, hovering lightly above the ground, drifting by without disturbing anything. "Go, stop them and kill them!" The mysterious girl spoke for the first time. Her voice was cold and ethereal, but inexplicably with a trace of vicissitudes and depth that did not match her age. After receiving her order, the 4 shadow steel golems calmly slid into the surrounding shadows and disappeared without a trace. Just as the mysterious girl mobilized the few remaining defensive trump cards of the wizard tower, Alice, who was in the distance, suddenly frowned and stopped moving forward. Not far from her, the ice dancer Chave, who had always maintained a certain distance from her, also stopped at the same time and said coldly, "Why did you stop? I can feel that place is not far away." The violent witch Sophia, who was in charge of clearing the way in front, smashed a stone wall blocking the way with her stick and looked back disdainfully. "Why else? Of course, she is afraid. Among the 5 of us, her original strength is the weakest. If she is not afraid, who is afraid?" Other than Alice, Chave, and Sophia, the 3 of them were followed by 2 young witches. Looking at their faces, they were Amanda and Doris, who had interacted with Alice before. Looking at the situation, the 5 of them had formed a temporary combat team, and it seemed that they would not stop until they caught the conspirators and cut them into pieces. But as their eyes flickered, their expressions clearly showed that they appeared to be united, but were actually divided. They all had sinister expressions, each with their own ulterior motives. Sophia, whose body was so strong that it did not look like a woman, was about to continue mocking Alice, but the faces of a few witches with sharp minds in the team had already changed, and they whispered, "Be careful," and just as Sophia's face turned cold, and the muscles of her body suddenly tightened, 4 strange black shadows floated out from the shadows around her. Chapter 367. It had to be said that today could be Alice's lucky day. If the 4 shadow steel golems had chosen her as their first target, she would have become a corpse riddled with holes. No, under such a powerful shock wave of negative energy, her soul and body would have been transformed into some sort of undead creature in the shortest time possible. To her, this was undoubtedly more terrifying than death. Fortunately, their first target was Sophia. Perhaps it was because she was standing too close to the front, or perhaps it was because her sturdy body was more eye-catching. In any case, when the 4 shadow steel golems slid out from the shadows, their 8 sharp claws immediately pierced towards Sophia, who was speaking with her hands on her waist. Sophia's reaction speed was very fast. Even without the witch's warning, she immediately sensed the abnormality beside her. The shadow steel golems relied on their bodies that could freely traverse the shadow plane to appear and disappear unpredictably. As long as there were shadows, their heavy bodies seemed to have lost all weight, and they could swim freely in the shadow plane like swift little fish. There was no sound, no obstruction, no violent energy undulations. The only thing was that the shadow matter around the target was slightly thicker than before. The slight increase in the shadow matter was almost undetectable if one did not close their eyes. However, Sophia was an awakened with 13 points in the power of destiny. Her spiritual perception did not rely on her tentacles, but the premonition of danger that came with the power of destiny. Hence, the moment danger approached, Sophia went berserk almost instantly. In truth, Sophia's body was originally big and burly. From her appearance, she looked more like a warrior than a magus. At this moment, her body expanded, and her muscles bulged, making her look like an indomitable valkyrie. The thick wooden staff in her hand seemed to be some sort of soul equipment. It grew thicker as her body grew, and she danced like the wind. In an instant, she smashed away 2 shadow steel golems that were too close to her. However, at the same time, her body was continuously injured. Her left shoulder, left rib, right hip, and right leg spurted out large amounts of blood. However, the berserk Sophia did not care about the injuries on her body. The thick wooden staff in her hand landed on a shadow steel golem that was trying to escape at the speed of a storm. Before it could merge with the shadows beside her, Sophia had already smashed its skull and body into pieces in a violent and ferocious manner. The shadow steel golem was a special type of assassin golem after all. It was not known for its sturdy body, but for its ghostly appearance. For this reason, when it encountered Sophia, this mad woman who was like a violent valkyrie, it only took 1 round before it was smashed into a pile of scrap metal. However, it was only at this moment that Shefa's ice shield and Avatar's energy shield finally landed on Sophia. However, it was a pity that after Sophia transformed into a berserk witch, she already had a body that was resistant to magic. The advantage of having a body that was resistant to magic was that it could resist the negative energy impact and shadow damage of the shadow steel golem's close-range attack. However, the disadvantage was that it also blocked her teammates from healing her and buffing her. Thus, ever since Sophia had become a berserk witch, she had always been alone. She rarely formed a team with others. One of the main reasons was that she could not enjoy the benefits that other teammates brought to her. However, as the saying goes, what you lose on the swings, you gain on the swings. Although Sophia had lost the right to enjoy the buffs due to her violent body that was resistant to magic, she had unexpectedly gained an extremely strong recovery ability. Almost as soon as the 3 shadow steel golems disappeared, the huge wounds on Sophia's body started to wriggle and close at a speed visible to the naked eye. With this speed, a few wounds that would be considered serious injuries on an ordinary which would most likely completely heal in 3 to 5 minutes. Damn cowards, you only dare to hide in the shadows. If you dare to come out again, I'll smash all of you into pieces. Sophia stepped on the broken and twisted black body of a shadow steel golem as she scolded the air around her. Her ferocious and wild aura was undeniable. Faced with this kind of shadow assassin that came and went without a trace, she was the only one among the few present who had the confidence to be so arrogant. The rest of the witches immediately began to cast all kinds of defensive spells on themselves. Group Bull's Strength. Strength +2. Group Cat's Agility. Agility +2. Group Bear's Tenacity. Vitality +2. Group Fox's Cunning. Intelligence +2. Negative Energy Protection. Shadow Protection. Foresight. Speed Boost. Originally, with their relationship, It was impossible for them to let others enjoy the buffs of their spells. But today, a common enemy had appeared in front of them, and the other party had displayed a terrifying ambition to kill them all in one fell swoop. Thus, the group of people who were fighting in full swing just a moment ago immediately became comrades in the same camp. In order to unleash everyone's full power, no one dared to hold back, and they all took out their trump cards. With the support of this series of buffs, everyone's basic stats started to increase explosively. Everyone's bodies were wrapped in layers of energy shields and defensive spells. Now, even if they did not have Sophia's terrifying physiques, the remaining 3 Shadow Steel Golems would not be able to deal with them so easily. Alice was even more exaggerated. She directly released a huge spider golem that was the size of a war chariot, and then silently burrowed into its abdomen, disappearing without a trace. The berserk which Sophia grunted, and carried her thick wooden staff as she led the way. The ice dancer chef, whose entire body was wrapped in ice crystal barriers of varying thickness, followed closely behind. Amanda also threw out 2 bottles of potions, and summoned 2 human-shaped storm elementals. She and Doris walked in the middle of the team. Alice controlled the spider golem, and brought the Inferno Tyrant with her to the back of the team. This choice of team formation also took care of the characteristics of Chef and the other 2 girls. After all, the 3 of them had mostly chosen to take support or elemental paths. Once they encountered a sneak attack from the Shadow Steel Golems, their chances of survival were far lower than Sophia and Alice's. However, just as the team was about to take shape and was slowly approaching that mysterious place, a hoarse and unpleasant metallic sound came from the darkness in the distance. In the hazy shadows, more than 20 shaky armored guards and close to 100 modified wizard beasts formed a dense battle formation, slowly closing in on them. One could not blame them for being slow. When this small team of tower guardians stepped into the area illuminated by the Inferno Tyrant's scorching flames, everyone finally saw their true colors. Tragic. Really tragic. The 27 armored guards were a group of metal armor that had been activated. Through the gaps in the rusty armor, one could see the lingering black gas within the armor. Due to the corrosion of close to 1,000 years, this batch of armored guards had already rusted beyond recognition. As they dragged their stiff and rotten metal bodies forward, pieces of corroded metal parts fell from time to time. Many of the armored guards' metal kneecaps and metal leg guards had already corroded to the point that they could no longer support the weight of the armor. While they were still walking, they would fall apart with a loud crack. In the end, only the upper half of their bodies were still crawling on the floor with difficulty. Such tower guardians did not need to be very strong warriors. Even the delicate Amanda with the bull's strength could probably smash 1 or 2 of them with her staff. It was the same for the rest of the modified wizard beasts. Those life element wizard beasts had already died a long time ago. Almost all that was left were undead wizard beasts. Debo corpses, banshees, vengeful spirits, mummies. These wizard beasts were bound by the contract within the tower, but they had not received any nourishment from their souls or flesh for 1,000 years. All of them were so hungry and thirsty. Now that they sensed the aura of life, they immediately became restless. Ignoring the mysterious girl's previous orders, they abandoned their formation and swarmed forward, howling crazily as they pounced toward the witch team. In their team, the 5 mummy elders and 3 undead banshees were once level 3 undead creatures. However, their souls had deteriorated over a long period of time, causing their abilities to remain at the beginner level of level 2. They could barely be considered weak level 2 creatures. Hence, their sudden attack clearly increased the pressure on the witch team. Alice controlled the spider puppet beast, waving its 4 pairs of sharp limbs and leaping over the heads of the 3 women. She came to the front of the team and stood next to Sophia. Facing the ferocious enemies, the most important thing was whether they could withstand their mad dog attacks. Abandoning the slow-moving armored guards, mummies, Debo corpses, and other teammates, the first wave of undead wizard beasts that surged forward were all soul-type. The three undead banshees took the lead, opening their mouths to let out terrifying howls that were almost inaudible as they flew toward the center of the witch team. The shrill howls that the undead banshees let out had the terrifying power to tear apart the souls of living creatures. No matter how sturdy the physical and energy defense was, it would be useless against an individual that lacked soul protection. Hence, this shrill howl belonged to the psionic sorcery category. It could ignore any defense, except for psionic sorcery. Hence, the undead banshees' killing method was not to attack directly. Instead, they would fly to your side and let out a shrill howl that no human could withstand. In the face of this unimaginably shrill howl, all souls were like crystal and fragile glass, shattering one after another. If your soul was strong enough, you might be able to withstand the invasion of your soul shattering. However, as your soul was continuously pulled by the shrill howl, your soul shook uneasily, causing you to temporarily lose all ability to resist. You could only watch as the undead banshees turned into a shadow and invaded your body. That's right, the undead banshees' other terrifying talent was occupation. They could control your body for a short period of time and achieve the effect of betrayal. Chapter 368. Three necromancers with level 2 strength rushed into the team at the same time and let out a death scream. Such a scene was beautiful just thinking about it, but they definitely could not let it happen. With the average strength of the witch team, if such a thing really happened, the whole team would definitely be annihilated. Almost at the same time that the three ghoul demonesses forced their way into the team, the Inferno Tyrant's resistance halo had already enveloped the small team of witches. Layer after layer of flame shock waves were like dense water ripples, constantly sweeping outwards. The three necromancers floated in the air like boats sailing against the current. They were blocked by the flame shock waves, and could only let their incorporeal bodies sizzle from the heat. They cried out in pain, but could not advance an inch. And at this time, the 5 mummy elders behind the necromancers also moved their stiff bodies and rushed forward. They were wrapped in shrouds covered with runes and spells, and could freely change the rune attributes. At this moment, seeing that the Inferno Tyrant's flames were too terrifying, the runes on the shrouds on the surface of their bodies flashed, and they actually adjusted their attributes to fire resistance in the shortest time possible. Then, they waved their black claws and pounced forward. "You resist those necromancers, leave these big guys to me." After a simple explanation, Sophia, who had transformed into a terrifying female giant, waved her thick wooden staff and rushed forward. The necromancers flew extremely fast and were good at guerrilla warfare. They were not Sophia's favorite type. On the contrary, these mummy elders were all slow. Although they were extremely strong, and every attack was accompanied by the corrosive gas and the slowing halo. But such attacks were clearly restrained by the violent witch's anti-magic physique, so Sophia waved her staff and went straight for them. Both sides were meat shield-type professions. Although the mummy elders' strength had fallen to level 2, their terrifying strength and physique were still far above Sophia's. If not for their low agility, slow movement speed, and ridiculously slow attack frequency, Sophia might not even be qualified to fight them with her strength. Originally, with the stacked slowing halo, they could usually slow down the enemy's speed. Then, with the super-strong physical defense of the necromancers and the fact that the undead did not have any fatal points, they could slowly kill the enemy. But unfortunately, they encountered Sophia, the violent witch sacrificed all her spellcasting abilities in exchange for a terrible anti-magic physique and melee fighting skills far beyond ordinary people. When Sophia, who had turned into a female giant, charged into their ranks and swung her thick wooden staff to hit them until their clothes and flesh flew everywhere, they could only stagger forward and wave their black claws, trying their best to scratch the afterimages that Sophia left behind. When Shefu blew an extremely cold air into their ranks, the mummy elders' movements became even slower. Furthermore, the phantoms of Sophia that Doris had created with her illusory magic were able to fool them. Often, they would only realize that they had destroyed a phantom after a long time of trying to surround it. As for Avatar, he kept tossing out small bottles of reagents, summoning various types of energy puppets from them. Their battle strength was only comparable to that of a senior apprentice, but they had the advantage in numbers, and she didn't need to control and command them too much. Thus, this made up for the witch team's shortcomings. But when Sophia faced off against the 5 mummy elders and the Inferno Tyrant went all out to deal with the 3 Thanatos, the 3 shadow steel golems hiding in the dark appeared again. They killed more than 10 energy golems as soon as they appeared. If not for Alice controlling the spider puppet beast to protect Amanda, she would probably have been defeated by the enemy in one wave. It had to be said that with Amanda and Doris's strength, dealing with 1 shadow steel golem was already enough to make them flustered. If 3 of them attacked at the same time, it would be difficult for the 2 of them to last more than a few rounds even if they fought together. And they actually represented the witch's normal strength. As for monsters like Alice and Sophia, who could challenge multiple level 2 creatures with level 1 strength, they were, after all, in the minority. Even Shefu, who had always been hailed as a genius girl, was suppressed by the Berserk Witch and the Inferno Tyrant's odd jour. Amanda and Doris simply hid under the body of the spider golem. Relying on its 4 pairs of sharp metallic limbs and the terrifying flames that the Inferno Tyrant was spreading everywhere, they resisted the shadow steel golem's all-pervasive sneak attack from the shadows. Xuefu seemed to be enraged by her 2 companions as well. Her entire body was wrapped in layers of ice crystal barriers as she floated in mid-air. She unleashed her sorcery on the enemies in her field of vision without any restraint. Ice shards, frost ring, ice spear shot, blizzard. It could be said that the majority of the ice element spells were area of effect spells. Especially in terms of freezing and slowing down the enemy's movement, it was a specialty that other elements couldn't match up to. Streaks of azure frost rings suddenly exploded around the witch team. Every time the crystal-clear frost broke, a light blue frost aura would dissipate. And in the area they enveloped, anything would be covered by a layer of frost, and flesh and blood would be frozen in place, unable to move. Up in the sky, fist-sized hailstones and ice blades continuously rained down from the dark ceiling. They formed a terrifying tornado around the witch team, and any creature that stepped into the area would have to endure the endless ice blades. Without a word, Ice Dancer Shefu perfectly demonstrated the terrifying strength of an ice type witch with practical actions. With her in charge of controlling the situation, the pressure on Sophia was immediately alleviated. The 3 revenants had just gotten rid of the interference of the flame shock wave, but before they could regroup, they fell into Shefu's ice vortex again. Their translucent bodies were covered in thick frost as they were swept up in the vortex and drifted around, unable to escape. And the Inferno Tyrant took the opportunity to stop the flame ripples, and began to frantically gather fire elements around his body, as if preparing for a big move. This was actually the right thing to do. After all, the 3 revenants were terrifying level 2 undead creatures, and it would be extremely difficult for ordinary level 1 spells to harm the resentment cores in their bodies. However, with the Inferno Tyrant's super strength, he could reach 175 degrees of fire damage when he cast spells at full strength, and spirit-type creatures often had to suffer double the elemental damage when they turned incorporeal, so this gave the Inferno Tyrant a chance to kill them instantly. And as the Inferno Tyrant's temporary master, Alice naturally had to support his actions. The spider puppet beast that was waving its giant pincers and limbs with all its might just a moment ago suddenly stopped, and the ends of its 4 pairs of sharp metal limbs sank deep into the hard floor beneath its feet. Then, the 2 pitch-black cannon muzzles that occupied the top of the spider's metal body began to spit out purple plasma bubbles at the revenants that were trapped in the vortex and unable to escape. The plasma bubbles did not start out fast, but with the subtle pull of the elemental particles, their speed became faster and faster, until finally, they hit a revenant that was still struggling hard at lightning speed. After coming into contact with the thin frost shell outside the other party's body, the huge plasma bubble instantly burst, and a dazzling purple plasma poured out from inside, setting off a small lightning storm in an extremely small space. According to Grimm's inspection, the lightning storm formed by these purple plasma bubbles could reach a terrifying 130 degrees of intensity, and only the demonic cannons that were a combination of magic machinery and witchcraft could achieve such a shocking attack effect. And the lowest price to pay for such a cannon was 100 magic crystals. Therefore, ordinary magic crystals could not support the fierce output of the demonic cannons at all, and only high-concentration magic crystal cores could do so. Therefore, using the demonic cannons to bombard the enemy was equivalent to using magic crystals to smash the enemy to death. Unless it was a critical moment, even Alice would not dare to waste it so easily. And the result of paying a large number of magic crystals was also the most fruitful. Most of the unlucky revenant's body was engulfed by the lightning storm that surged out from the plasma bubble. When she rushed out from inside while howling miserably, her translucent body was already riddled with holes, and nearly half of her torso was missing. Without waiting for the revenant to scream and escape into the distant darkness, the Inferno tyrant raised his hands that were wrapped in flames, and an instantaneous fire core molten explosion engulfed her once again. This time, the revenant could not escape. Following a mournful sigh, a Tier 2 undead banshee, whose soul had been weakened to the extreme, finally became Alice's first sacrifice. Upon seeing this, the remaining 2 revenants were scared out of their wits. They no longer cared about attacking the enemy, and struggled to break free from the bindings of the blizzard. They escaped into the surrounding darkness, not daring to approach recklessly anymore. And taking advantage of the spider puppet monster's full cooperation with the Inferno tyrant to attack the revenant, the 3 shadow steel golems also took the opportunity to appear by its side, and their sharp claws slashed at the hard metal shell of the spider puppet monster, causing sparks to fly. And the spider puppet monster's suspended spider head was also turning around, and from the beehive compound eyes at the front continuously shot out colorful energy rays. The red ones were the scorching rays emitted by the ruby. The blue ones were the freezing rays emitted by the sapphire. The earthy yellow ones were the petrifying rays emitted by the eye of petrification. The purple ones were the paralyzing rays emitted by the drake's pearl. The green ones were the disintegrating rays emitted by the venom ball. Although the attack strength of these energy rays were between 15 to 30 degrees, and only belonged to low-intensity attack spells, they were superior in terms of their large numbers, and they also came with all kinds of strange spells. Chapter 369. 1 undead banshee was killed instantly, and the other 2 were scared off. Alice, who had her hands free, immediately urged the spider puppet to charge forward and join the battle between Sophia and the 5 mummy elders. The Inferno tyrant and Chave had transformed into 2 super terrifying long-range cannons, unscrupulously spreading ice and fire spells to every inch of space around them. In comparison, Avatar and Doris were completely useless. The only spells they had were all used for defense. They followed closely behind the Inferno tyrant, carefully guarding against another sneak attack from the Shadow Steel Golem. With Alice's strong support, Sophia, who had been wandering around and fighting, immediately unleashed all the characteristics of a berserk witch. The thick wooden staff in her hand danced like it was flying, and in an instant, a few mummy elders were hit to the point where their clothes and rotten flesh flew everywhere. It was not strange for a level 1 to fight a level 2 magus. First of all, one should never equate a level 2 magus with a level 2 magus. If a level 2 magus wanted to grow, they usually had to experience unimaginable hardships and obstacles. Only by relying on profound knowledge and a wise mind could they succeed. However, these Tier 2 magi were never unarmed. Powerful and custom-made magus equipment, vast amounts of spellcasting materials, large amounts of magic gems, inexhaustible potions, scrolls, magic wands, alchemy items, enchanted equipment, and a systematic system of magus knowledge, in a situation where the basic data of the human body was inferior to that of the magical beasts. Human magi still had the absolute advantage and upper hand when fighting against the magical beasts. They relied on these external objects and effective combat method. And what did the magical beasts have? 1,000,000 years ago, they relied on their strong bodies and strange natural abilities to rule over one world after another. But now the intelligent races of the various planes grew stronger step by step, and gradually learned many things from the magical beasts, and understood their abilities and methods. At this time, what did they improve? Strong individuals still relied on their strong bodies and natural abilities to fight, and groups still did not think about improving, running on the path of natural instincts until they died. Although many intelligent magical beasts in the dark forest of the Sorcerer continent had begun to learn the methods of human magi, their actions were not big enough, nor were they thorough enough. Selfishness and the lack of systematic inheritance would always be the biggest obstacle that they could not overcome. A rank 2 elder mummy would need 1,000 to 2,000 years to evolve from millions of undead creatures, but a rank 2 wizard would only need 400 to 500 years. Some geniuses among magi might even need half the time. Apart from the difference in the amount of time they spent, the difference in status between them would become even more obvious once they reached grade 2. Even if those undead creatures relied on the slow accumulation of time to break through to grade 2, their strength was still worlds apart from a grade 2 human wizard. If it had not awakened to higher intelligence and was still a chaotic and ignorant monster, it would only be fit to be the prey and slave of human wizards. Only those monsters who had awakened their own consciousness and high intelligence could stand on equal footing with human wizards and solve their conflicts in another way. Unfortunately, the undead wizard beasts in front of them were clearly not intelligent magical beasts. Otherwise, they would not have been reduced to being the watchdogs of the human wizards who guarded the wizard's pagoda. So when Sophia used her berserk wizard spells and soul equipment to fight against the elder mummy, what did they have? They still had rotten flesh that was harder than steel, and the strange shroud that had evolved naturally. Other than that, they had nothing. Thus, when Alice, who was more well-equipped and powerful, joined the battle, the elder mummy's level advantage was completely wiped out. Their hard bodies that had been tempered were stronger than all steel, but compared to the magic iron alloy that the wizards had refined and improved, they were still weak. The shroud that they had evolved naturally had a strange effect. It could selectively strengthen certain attributes according to the will of the mummy, but compared to the ever-changing wizard spells of the wizards, it was still inferior. Furthermore, the corpse corrosive gas and slowing halo that they relied on to defeat their enemies could not do anything to Sophia and Alice. Thus, the battle immediately became one-sided. Alice rode on the spider puppet beast and charged forward fiercely, blocking most of the attacks from the 5 elder mummies. No matter how hard the opponent smashed its metal shell, creating shallow pits, the spider puppet beast refused to retreat. Instead, it used its sharp and powerful limbs and the terrifying giant pincers at the front to slice off the opponent's body, sending debris flying everywhere. The demonic cannons that were perched on top of the spider puppet beast also fired continuously, using plasma bubbles to bombard the heads and chests of the mummy. If not for the tough bodies of the mummies, and the fact that the shroud had turned into an electric resistance attribute in time, Alice might really have had the pleasure of slaughtering a level 2 creature again. However, even so, in the face of such a powerful and all-metal monster, every time it spun in the air, it could scrape up a large piece of the ground. The mummy elders could only retreat step by step, being beaten by the 2 violent witches until they covered their heads and scurried away like rats. They no longer had their previous arrogance and ferocity. However, as time passed, Alice and the other 2 in the witch team started to feel more and more uneasy. Although the undead wizard beasts in front of them were strong, the mysterious person behind them had yet to show herself. It was as if she had abandoned them here for them to slaughter. This further proved that she had a huge conspiracy behind her back. Thinking of the alarm that the perception of fate in the depths of their hearts was giving off, Alice and the other two immediately became vigilant. "We can't fight with these trash, we have to think of a way to break through." Alice's voice came from the huge body of the spider puppet beast. "Humph, that sounds nice. Each of these monsters is harder to deal with than the last, and each of them is stronger than us. Do you think that they have a lump of metal on their head like you, and that they can fight their way through the monsters?" The violent witch Sophia had just been punched on the back by a mummy. She took a long time to breathe, and her reply was naturally not pleasant to the ears. Of course, she had also smashed the mummy's face, which was wrapped in layers of shroud, with a rod. Listening to the crisp cracking sound, the bridge of its nose and skull had probably been smashed in half. However, the mummy was worthy of being a meat shield unit with coarse skin and thick flesh. Even if the rotten flesh on a certain part of its body had been sliced to the point that it revealed its bones that were stronger than fine steel, it still did not affect its combat power in the slightest. Furthermore, they had rather tight defenses against the soul fire in their skulls and the heart core in their chests. Even if the rotten flesh on their arms had been smashed away, they still had to protect these vital parts. Therefore, even though the spider puppet beast, Sophia, and the Inferno Tyrant had joined forces to attack, they had not been able to successfully kill any of the elder mummy. Evidently, they could not afford to delay any longer. "We can't delay any longer." The warning in Alice's heart became more and more urgent. "I'll be the first to charge over, all of you remember to follow me." As soon as she finished speaking, the Inferno Tyrant, who was in the middle of the team, let out a roar towards the sky, and began to charge forward with large strides. At the same time that he charged, a violent crimson flame storm also spread and dispersed among the enemy team. Those low-level undead wizard beasts could not withstand this kind of high-intensity attack sorcery. One by one, they struggled to escape from the raging sea of flames. Using the crimson flame storm to clear the area, the spider puppet beast that Alice was riding on moved its 4 pairs of metal limbs, and knocked away 2 elder mummies that were blocking its way. It shot out rays of light from its beehive compound eyes as it launched an unstoppable and barbaric charge. The 2 ghouls had just swooped down from the dark sky with a howl, when a few purple plasma bubbles went up to meet them. If these ghouls had any long-range methods, they would naturally be able to easily detonate them. Unfortunately, they did not. Therefore, the ghouls that had suffered were immediately scared out of their wit. They disappeared into the ceiling at an even faster speed, and finally managed to escape the pursuit of the plasma bubbles. The spider puppet beast that Grimm had spent more than half a year to build for Alice was indeed worthy of its reputation. It was able to charge through the many powerful magical beasts as if it was walking on flat ground. No matter how the other party smashed its metal shell and scratched at it, sparks flew everywhere. Whenever its sharp limbs swept past, there would always be some undead wizard beasts that did not have eyes that would have their stomachs cut open and their bodies split into 2. Alice did not pay any attention to these low-level undead wizard beasts. She gritted her teeth and rode on the spider puppet beast, moving its 4 pairs of limbs that made metallic clanking noises as she charged forward with all her might. Only when the few level 2 undead wizard beasts got too close would Alice shoot out a few plasma bubbles to drive them away. With the spider puppet beast's penetration, the Inferno Tyrant's clearing of the area, coupled with Sophia's powerful and heavy wooden stick attacks, and Chave's large-scale blizzard to control the area, the speed of the witch team immediately soared. They knocked away the wizard beasts and armored guards that were blocking their way, and charged straight towards the witchcraft facility that was flickering with a strange light in the distance. The strong attack of Alice and the other 2 women immediately exposed the weak Amanda and Doris. Previously, they had either stayed close to the Inferno Tyrants left and right, or followed behind the spider puppet beast. At least they were able to receive the protection and support of some teammates. Now that their teammates had started to go all out, the two of them were at the back of the team, and immediately became the fresh meat that was the easiest to swallow. 3 shadow steel golems that appeared and disappeared mysteriously, 2 ghouls that popped out from the ceiling or the floor from time to time, and a few mummy elders that Alice had shaken off. These fellows seemed to have targeted their attacks at the two of them, and it seemed like they were surrounding them from all sides. "Don't leave us behind. Bring us along," as they screamed crazily. The two women used all their skills, stumbling and stumbling as they followed behind the team. Chapter 370. Inside the tower, the flames of war were raging. Outside the tower, the witches who were waiting anxiously were all bored to death. The Tower of Destiny had only been open for a short 4 hours, and since then, there had been no more movement. However, the sky was not so peaceful. From time to time, a magnificent dazzling light streaked across the sky and silently entered the towering Tower of Destiny. This also caught Grimm's attention. He had secretly done some experiments just now. Regardless of whether it was mental strength or elemental magic, it was difficult to penetrate the mysterious power that enveloped the entire Tower of Destiny. He had even lost contact with the Inferno Tyrant, who had been branded with his soul aura at the core of his consciousness, let alone trying to communicate with Alice. Grimm secretly gave one of the Hikila resonance crystals from the night plane to Alice, hoping to keep in touch with her through it. Unfortunately, the resonance crystal that was said to be able to penetrate the plane barriers had also failed. However, in the tightly guarded Tower of Destiny, the dazzling 5-colored light streaked across the sky and entered it. How could Grimm not be surprised? These foolish fellows. Since they have already become the carriers of destiny, they still want to resist their own destiny. Do they think that by hiding far enough, they can avoid the battle of destiny? In the end, they lost their last chance. Humph, how foolish! An old witch with an aquiline nose and sunken eye sockets looked up at the dazzling light streaking across the top of her head, and could not help but mock softly. Hearing this, Grimm's body trembled slightly. When he raised his head to look at the dazzling light again, he felt completely different from before. This was not some kind of magic, but was a life. Seriously speaking, when the Battle of Destiny had begun, there were less than 150 people who had arrived at the Tower of Destiny. Were there only so many people who had awakened the innate talent of destiny in the entire Sorcerer continent? No. According to Grimm's contact with the Witches of Death, every time a witch faction that had lost their inheritance returned, there would be at least 300 to 400 candidates. This meant that the number of awakened people who had arrived at the Tower of Destiny to participate in the Battle of Destiny was less than a third of the total number. So, could they ensure their survival by hiding far away? Grimm fell silent as he looked at the colorful light streaking across the sky above his head. No matter where you hide, no matter how strong you are, when the Tower of Destiny closes, all the awakened of destiny who are not present will suffer the backlash of the plane's laws. The destiny talent that had once brought you limitless glory and glory in the past had now become a lethal poison to you. At this moment, in various hidden corners of the Sorcerer continent, countless awakened ones were wailing in pain, desperately begging for something. But it was useless. An inexplicable flame of laws spread out from the depths of her soul, burning her body, flesh, bones, and organs into ashes. All of the essence of the flesh and soul was refined into a mysterious substance, then attached to the strand of destiny force, and sent to the Tower of Destiny from afar. Such scenes were happening frequently in various regions. No one could intervene, and no one dared to intervene. Those who gave up on the Battle of Destiny also gave up on their last chance to struggle. The moment the Tower of Destiny closed its doors, all the awakened ones left outside could not escape the backlash of the law of destiny. They turned into the purest nourishment and were sent to the core of the Tower of Destiny, waiting for the birth of a new destiny which, Why was every new destiny which able to gain a firm foothold so quickly? Why did the new destiny which receive so much attention from various witch factions? This was the reason. With these nourishment as food, any new destiny which could become a grade 2 or even grade 3 powerhouse in the shortest time possible. As for whether or not they could return to the ranks of the grade 4 witch leaders, it would depend on the person's talent. However, how could a person who could become a destiny witch lack talent? This in itself was a very funny question. So, the new destiny which would definitely be a grade 4 powerhouse, it was only a matter of time. And for this future grade 4 powerhouse, even the Witch Council had to give her the most basic respect and appropriate and necessary authority. This also meant that after the end of the Battle of Destiny, Alice was very likely to become a senior witch that even Grimm could only look up to. At that time, the relationship between the two was very likely to have a huge reversal. At that time, it would not be Alice who needed Grimm's strength, but Grimm who would need to hug Alice's thick thigh tightly. It had to be said that Grimm's judgment of people was quite accurate. Ever since he first heard about the War of Destiny from the poison centipede Ender, he had searched through all the information he could find on the War of Destiny and the Witches of Destiny. From then on, he had the idea of taking a shortcut and taking a shortcut. A one-time investment, a lifelong return. Once he won the bet, he would have a senior witch to protect him, and his future would be indescribably comfortable. Even if he lost the bet, the loss would only be some worldly possessions. He was a registered wizard of the Salubo family in the scattered Talon region. Although the northern witches were rude and unreasonable, they still needed a reason to kill him. As long as he did not resist, even if they caught him and brought him to the Witch Council, it would only be a few years, and he would only have to bleed a lot. After all, the wizard he killed was the one who provoked them, and she was not a northern witch. So, there was really no need for the Witch Council to fight with him over this matter. Moreover, Grimm had already planned it out. If he really failed, he would use the last void stone to redeem his freedom. Anyway, if Alice's plan failed, there would be a huge and irreparable flaw in his plan of plain conquest, and there would be no point in keeping the void stone. It was precisely because of this that Grimm did not have the slightest arrogance of a master when he was interacting with Alice. Instead, he always showed consideration for Alice and treated her as an equal. All this was to not ruin the relationship between him and Alice. The fragile master-servant contract would probably vanish the moment Alice succeeded. A powerful fate which would submit to a Tier 1 male fire shaman? It was a good idea to think about it, but if she tried to put it into practice, the entire Witch Council would probably skin Grimm alive. That was why Grimm had always treated Alice as a friend in their previous interactions. Although this kind of feeling seemed very fake, there was a trace of sincerity in it. Would Alice become a grade 2 or grade 3 fate witch? The first thing she would do when they met was to smash him into minced meat, right? After she became a fate witch, how much of his previous emotional investment would be left? Grimm's mind was filled with things that he could not completely control, and it made his wait even longer and more torturous. With a loud crash, the spider puppet beast broke through the wall of the sorcerer hall and rushed into the illusory world full of strange runes. The sea of light in the hall suddenly disappeared, and the runes etched on the floor, walls, and ceiling exploded one after another. This also allowed the witches who were immersed in another world to break free one by one. The moment the illusion disappeared, nearly half of the apprentices and 2 witches in the group of witches fell limply to the ground, losing their lives. As for the others, they were either screaming in pain, howling in grief, or desperately attacking the side of their bodies. It was obvious that they would not be able to get rid of the illusion in a short period of time. Amidst the crowd, there was an ordinary-looking mysterious girl leaning against a young witch. One of her hands was pressed against the witch's mouth, while the other was using an extremely ordinary dagger to gently slit the witch's throat. What was extremely strange was that there was clearly no aura of power on the body of the young witch who was about to die, but a powerful elemental aura surged from the body of the young witch. But she seemed to have given up all resistance, and actually allowed the girl to quietly kill her. Many of the witches had just gotten rid of the illusion, and their minds had not completely calmed down. They looked around at the shocking scene in front of them, but they still did not understand the whole story. "It's her. Kill her!" Alice's sharp voice came from the spider puppet beast. In the next moment, the huge metal spider puppet moved its many metal limbs, and with a powerful clang of metal, it pounced towards the girl in the crowd with an unstoppable force. As it pounced forward, the spider puppet raised its body high, and the compound beehive eyes at its front shot out colorful energy rays. A pair of huge insect pincers pierced towards the girl fiercely. At this moment, the violent witch Sophia and the ice dancer Chave had just passed through the big hole, and their eyes immediately fell on the girl. To those fellows whose destiny power was lower than 10 points, the mysterious young lady was a completely transparent existence. Even if their eyes saw her, their minds would automatically ignore her due to the veil of fate. However, to those who had more than 10 fate power, the girl was like a bright moon in the sky, and it was difficult for anyone to ignore her existence. Thus, when Chave and the other two entered the hall, they could no longer see anyone else. They were completely attracted by the mysterious girl who did not have a good appearance, but was strangely filled with a strange aura. "Kill her!" The girl raised her head, and a pair of deep black eyes flashed with the light of wisdom. She pointed at the spider puppet that Alice was in and shouted in a low voice, "She is the instigator of this illusion. Let's work together to kill her." Strangely, her voice was calm, and even though they could not sense the existence of any strange power, it mysteriously affected all the witches around her. Chapter 371 F***CK. At this moment, if Alice had the time to curse, she would have warmly greeted all the relatives of these ***stards. The murderers who slaughtered them were clearly hiding behind her, but they did not care about what was good for them and aimed their attacks at her. If it was a group of apprentice witches standing in front of her, then Alice would not have to worry about them posing any threat to her. But at this moment, the group in front of her included 9 witches and 17 apprentice witches. If any one of them was singled out, Alice would only smile sinisterly and command the spider puppet beast to crush them. But when they came together to trigger a monstrous wave of witchcraft, even Alice, who was hiding in the thick metal shell, felt her scalp go numb and her limbs go cold. The colorful elemental sorcery blended together and converged into a terrifying torrent of elemental sorcery. The elemental sorcery shook and collided with each other as it rushed towards the spider puppet monster. Alice screamed inside and hurriedly commanded the spider puppet beast to dodge sideways. While dodging, the metal spider's beehive compound eyes flickered, raising layers of force field barriers. Among all the defensive witchcraft, this force field barrier was undoubtedly the best. Most of the other defensive witchcraft had an elemental bias. Although it was effective in defending against witchcraft attacks of the same element, it was easy to be restrained by the corresponding elemental witchcraft. The force field barrier, on the other hand, was pure magic energy and did not have an elemental bias, so it was especially suitable for large-scale wizard battles. But even so, the force field barrier raised by the spider puppet beast as thick as a tortoise shell did not last for 3 seconds. The elemental witchcraft attack strength had even reached 200 to 300 degrees at this moment. It easily broke through the translucent force field barrier and engulfed the spider puppet beast that could not escape in time. Sophia and Chave, who were following closely behind the spider puppet beast, also hurriedly dodged the attack. Although the violent witch had a magic resistance physique, there was a limit to this immunity. If the limit was exceeded, she would still have to bear the consequences. An attack of 200 to 300 degrees had already reached the level of a grade 2 wizard. Even she did not dare to take it head-on. Just when Alice and the others were thrown into chaos by the witch's betrayal, the mysterious girl gently let go of the witch's corpse in her arms. She closed her eyes and raised her head, carefully savoring the pleasure of the power of fate surging and condensing in her body. As if she had crossed an invisible threshold, the characteristics that the mysterious girl displayed actually had a faint trace of difference, as if even her soul had ascended to an unfathomable level. 20 points. The power of fate from the witch she had just killed had finally increased her total fate to 20 points, a terrifying critical point on the verge of a qualitative change. Unknowingly, the Sorcerer Hall began to undergo various mysterious changes. The floor beneath his feet and the walls around him gradually turned transparent and bright. Countless light blue, light purple, and dark red magical lines intertwined and overlapped, forming glowing wizard power node. Countless lines of magic power that resembled blood vessels and meridians extended and extended at will. They seemed to be in a mess, but they gave off a mysterious feeling. They connected with each other and coiled into three-dimensional rune structures of different shapes and sizes. Specks of tiny runes appeared one after another and slowly connected into a chain of runes that outsiders could not decipher. At this moment, in everyone's eyes, the entire Sorcerer Hall had disappeared. The floor, the vault, and the walls were all hidden in the darkness, leaving only a mysterious spell formation that was weaved by countless magic threads. Powerful wizard power surged unceasingly in the rune chain. They coiled and intertwined with each other. Through the layers of magic threads, they were perfectly connected and supported each other. They were connected by all the magic threads and fused into one, forming a huge and extremely mysterious and powerful spell formation. At this moment, the core of this mysterious spell formation was impressively the mysterious girl that no one could name. The girl's body slowly floated up. It was as if a small sun had suddenly been stuffed into her body, emitting a strange dazzling light that made people dizzy, vaguely reflecting her limbs and bones. At the core of the dazzling sun, a fate ring formed by two serpent tails was impressively visible. This is the totem of the Witches of Fate. One of the female witches who had studied magic runes and totems screamed. Her words were like a bomb, instantly pulling everyone out of their dizziness. What were they here for? Of course, it was to fight for the 1 in 10,000 chance of becoming a Witch of Fate. But this witch in front of them actually had the Witch of Fate totem one step ahead of them. Did this not mean that she had already obtained the recognition of the law of fate? And if she won, did it not mean that everyone would become the abandoned child of fate, and become someone else's stepping stone? In an instant, many of the witches felt as if their hearts had sunk into a 1,000-year cold pond, completely cold, and their teeth chattered from the cold. But just as everyone's hearts were about to die, and their fighting spirit was slowly diminishing, Shui-Fu gritted her teeth and stood up. Why are you all panicking? Only after the complete ceremony can she be considered a true Witch of Fate. As long as we kill her before the ceremony ends, everyone still has a chance. Saying this, Shui-Fu waved her hands, and a series of ice spikes whistled through the air towards the girl who was frozen in midair. The ice witchcraft touched the outer layer of the mysterious spell formation, and immediately caused a strong backlash. Dozens of ice spears that were far more powerful than the ice spikes appeared in the air, and pounced toward Shui-Fu with an even more ferocious stance. Shui-Fu's expression changed, and her eyes were filled with shock. These ice spears were far more powerful than her ice spikes. Could the ice armor outside her body withstand it? Just as she was thinking, unsure whether she should switch to defense or dodge, a huge figure suddenly appeared in front of her, using its huge body to block the ice spears. Clang, clang, clang. After the crisp sound of the explosion, the huge black figure moved its metal body, and Alice's angry roar came from within. "Sisters, what are you still hesitating for? For our lives, to fight for a chance for yourselves, kill her!" Amidst the roar, the slightly battered spider puppet beast suddenly pounced forward, and the demonic cannons on top of its huge metal body immediately opened fire without mercy. Purple plasma bubbles rained down on the girl, who was floating in the spell formation. "I hate those sneaky fellows the most. You little rat that kills people from behind, die." Sophia instantly turned into a berserk which, waving her thick wooden staff and charging forward with heavy steps that shook the earth. "That's right, sisters, our hard work cannot be ruined by this fellow who appeared out of nowhere. No matter who wants to take away our fate, I want him dead." The witch who had woken up for the first time screamed, and the glow of witchcraft lit up in her hands. With these people taking the lead, the witches and apprentices who had been confused and thought that they had lost all chances immediately found their backbone. Without needing anyone else to mobilize, the girl who was closest to the throne of the Witch of Fate became the target of everyone. Colorful spells of varying power rained down on the spell formation. Looking at the awakened ones attacking in unison, the mysterious young lady within the wizard formation slowly opened her eyes. Her pitch-black eyes were filled with the dignity and disdain of a person in a high position. She calmly said, "Humph, rude overachievers. You are just pitiful worms struggling in your destiny. You should just obediently accept your predestined fate. Otherwise, you will suffer the backlash of fate. Fate deprivation." With the girl's light shout, everyone present shuddered, and expressions of pain and struggle appeared on their faces. In the depths of their spiritual consciousness, a mysterious ball of light began to light up, and it slowly peeled away from their souls. Everyone let out heart-wrenching howls of pain. Ever since they had awakened the fate talent, it had become the most important part of their lives. Their abilities, their glory, their everything revolved around the destiny innate skill. But at this moment, with a single sentence from the mysterious girl, the fate talent, which was linked to them through life and death, was taken away just like that. If one were to describe the amount of effort and resources they had invested into the fate talent, then the pain they had to endure now would be incomparable. This was 10 times, no, 100 times more painful than being skinned and having one's tendons pulled out. The acolyte-level awakened ones were unable to endure such pain. As they rolled on the ground, the skin on the surface of their bodies ruptured inch by inch, revealing the tender red flesh and tendons beneath. Boundless blood overflowed, instantly turning them into unbearable bloody figures. The mysterious ball of light was slowly pulled away from their bodies. With every inch that was pulled away, one or several soul threads would suddenly snap. After all these years of hard work, the fate talent had long since become a part of their lives. It was inextricably linked to every inch of their flesh and skin. At this moment, they were being forcefully pulled away by an external force. The pain they felt was not something outsiders could understand. All of the acolytes died from the pain. After their deaths, their bodies, flesh, and souls were burned by a nameless flame, turning into the purest form of energy. The mysterious ball of light swept them into the spell formation. Chapter 372. The terrifying fate stripping was certainly fatal to witch apprentices, but for the witches whose mental strength had reached a qualitative change, it was bearable. During the massacre just now, the witches who survived almost all absorbed a part of the power of fate. Therefore, when the terrifying fate stripping befell them, they still had a lot of buffer time. As for the mysterious girl in front of them, everyone could only guess her identity. Although she was not considered a real fate witch, compared to the others in the tower, she was already infinitely close to the strongest candidate for the position of fate witch. Moreover, she also had a mysterious method to control the power of fate, which was not something an ordinary witch could comprehend and master. So, she was most likely part of the soul projection left behind by the previous fate witch. As far as everyone knew, the previous fate witch did not die, but crossed 4 levels and exceeded the upper limit of the sorcerer world's capacity, so she was forced to enter the Sea of Stars. Then, before she left, she would tamper with the birth ceremony of the next destiny witch, so that one of her soul projections would be the winner. This would also become logical. She was originally a part of the previous fate which, and had the body and soul most compatible with the power of fate. This also gave her an incomparable advantage when competing for the position of fate which, however, the birth of a fate which was directly controlled by the law of fate. If she wanted to successfully become a real fate which, she still had to faithfully carry out all the procedures set by the law of fate. The most important thing was that she had to increase the power of fate in her body to 21 points. And this could only be achieved by killing everyone present. What would people do at the last moment of their lives? Some people would wail in pain, close their eyes and wait for death, thinking that everything was predestined and could not be defied. Some people would fight hard. Even if the hope was slim, they would still fight to the last moment, to the last breath. The two weakest witches could not withstand the intense stimulation in front of them. They fell to the ground, crying and laughing, obviously on the verge of a mental breakdown. On their bodies, the flame of fate had already been ignited, burning their flesh and soul bit by bit, turning them into extremely pure mysterious energy. The 12 witches, including Alice and the Inferno Tyrant, were the only remaining resistance. They formed a small team and attacked the mysterious witchcraft in a frenzy. The spell formation was indestructible, and they could not shake it. Then attack the floor, attack the surroundings. In any case, any spell formation needed to be supported by spells. If the base of the spell formation was destroyed, the spell formation would also be destroyed. This was obviously a critical point. As the ground trembled and cracked, the spell formation floating in midair became unstable. Damned ants, can't you just accept your fate honestly? It seems like I still have to personally strip you of everything you have. The mysterious girl in the mysterious spell formation opened her eyes in anger. She spread her arms wide and floated out of the spell formation. Come at me together. Let me see if there are any delightful desserts among the awakened of destiny. Ants? Arrogant guy, you're the ant in my eyes. The one-eyed Sophia swayed her tall body and raised her thick wooden staff high as she charged towards the mysterious girl. Vision deprivation. However, as the young lady let out a shout that was filled with the power of a mysterious wizard spell, Sophia's vision suddenly turned black. Her remaining eye turned into a bottomless bloody hole, and a line of filthy blood flowed down like a snake. An earth-shattering sound rang out. The thick wooden staff in Sophia's hand brushed past the girl's body by a hair's breadth, and smashed a deep pit on the ground. She struggled to pull out the wooden staff, and tilted her head to try to capture the girl's position. It was obvious that she had lost her vision. We can't let her unleash her power unscrupulously. Everyone attack together. Although Alice was hiding in the spider puppet beast, she could see everything clearly through the scouting crystal. She immediately urged the Inferno Tyrant to be the first to charge forward. At this point, the Inferno Tyrant had once again transformed into a giant fiery man that was as tall as 5 meters. Raging flames rose from his entire body, and as he rapidly approached the mysterious girl, he did his best to throw out exploding fireballs the size of a washbasin. The mysterious girl relied on the power of flight to dodge quickly in the air, but she still could not avoid the large-scale flame shock wave formed after the exploding fireballs. Although the mysterious girl's soul far surpassed everyone present in terms of level, this body obviously could not reach the same level as her. Thus, after the surging flames scorched the cloth robe outside her body, the mysterious girl's emotions also became angry and anxious. A soul that doesn't belong to this world is destined to be abandoned by this world. As she evaded everyone's attacks, the mysterious girl pointed at the Inferno Tyrant and released her unique curse. The girl's voice had just fallen when a powerful mysterious force wrapped around the Inferno Tyrant, who was striding forward. Amidst a wave of intense distortion in the space, the Inferno Tyrant's tall flaming body actually disappeared into thin air, and not a trace of him could be found anymore. Alice, who was hiding in the spider puppet beast, instantly turned deathly pale. She could sense that the Inferno tyrant was not dead, but had just been expelled from this world by the other party. As long as she dragged on for a certain amount of time, until the witchcraft effect disappeared, the Inferno tyrant could return completely unscathed. However, it was obvious that the Inferno tyrant could no longer be of help in the battle before them. Alice could finally see that the witchcraft used by this mysterious girl was somewhat similar to the Law Department's Word of Truth spell. Every word she said was soaked with powerful and terrifying power, and could all become reality within the limits of what witchcraft could bear. However, for this kind of witchcraft similar to the Word of Truth spell, the caster had to carefully choose their own language. Once the prophecy she made could not be turned into reality by fate, then she would have to bear double the backlash of the witchcraft. Therefore, this kind of witchcraft was a double-edged sword. If one did not handle it well, it was very easy to hurt oneself. The berserk which Sophia was the first main force of the camp to be crippled by the other party. Having lost her eyes, she could only rely on her spiritual perception to capture the other party's position with difficulty. However, the mysterious girl's greatest characteristic was that her sense of existence was non-existent, and it was very difficult to lock onto her movement trajectory just by relying on one's spiritual perception. Therefore, Sophia was like a huge blind black bear, pouncing left and right, unable to hit the nimble and moving mysterious girl at all. If not for the witches beside her constantly pointing out the other party's position, perhaps she would not even have the chance to participate in the battle. Many witches surrounded the mysterious girl, continuously attacking her with witchcraft. Among them, the most eye-catching was naturally the ice dancer Shefu. At this moment, Shefu was wrapped in 6 to 7 rapidly revolving ice crystal shields. Her entire body was covered in colorful energy shields and protective force field. She floated in the air 3 meters above the ground, and the ice-type witchcraft in her hands poured out like a torrent towards the mysterious girl. The attacking power of her ice-type witchcraft might be average, and could only maintain a range of 70 to 100 degrees, but the accompanying freezing and slowing effects gave the mysterious girl a huge headache. The mysterious girl's body was surrounded by a mysterious energy aura, which could withstand the frenzied attacks of the crowd. Every time this mysterious energy was about to be depleted, she would reach out her hand towards the spell formation not far away, and draw a portion of the mysterious energy from within to continue protecting herself. The slowing effects of Shefu's ice-type witchcraft attacks made her expend 2 to 3 times more energy than usual. Without a doubt, this made the mysterious girl feel annoyed. Thus, her next target was the ice dancer Shefu. Headache. Diarrhea. Legs weak. In one breath, she let out 3 sentences that sounded like a prophecy and a curse at Shefu, and the ice dancer who had been bombarded with cannons immediately became listless. An intense headache assaulted her head, and Shefu held her head with her hands as she painfully fell to the ground. The moment she landed, her legs became weak, and she stumbled to the ground. However, this was not the most terrifying thing. The scariest thing was that Shefu suddenly clutched her lower abdomen, and a loud gurgling sound came from there. Damn it, what kind of method was this? It had to be said that the mysterious girl's attacking methods were beyond everyone's imagination. She moved within the witch's attack circle, and used her nimble body to dodge everyone's attacks. Only those attacks that she could not dodge, she would choose to take them head-on. And her attacking method was this kind of curse that came out of her mouth. Of course, you could also think of it as some kind of prophecy. As the mysterious girl moved quickly, she could not help but lightly point at one of the witches and let out a short witchcraft prophecy. And every prophecy would instantly become reality, causing the other party to fall into chaos or pain. Against those who were strong or mentally strong, she did not dare to give out overly fatal prophecies. But against those who were weak, she did not have this kind of worry. The first to die was a young witch with a baby face and freckles on the side of her nose. When the mysterious girl flew past her, she silently fell to the ground after a cry of death, losing her life. And the second unlucky one was Amanda. As a potion master, Amanda's main body's fighting ability was really very weak. And in battle, most of her attacks came from the energy slaves summoned by the witchcraft potion. Thus, when the mysterious girl gave her the prophecy of devouring its master, Amanda tragically died under the attack of her own summoned creatures. Under the mysterious girl's wandering attacks, witches fell one after another, and everyone could not help but feel threatened. And at this time, no matter how much Alice wanted to hide, the spider puppet's powerful attack still exposed her. Chapter 373. Everything that deviates from nature will be deviated from by nature. The mysterious girl's voice was crisp and clear, and the prophecy she cast was even more straightforward. As the prophecy was released, the mysterious witchcraft also shook violently, and a huge amount of dazzling light flowed out from it, quietly diffusing into the void. As the carrier of the prophecy, the mysterious girl seemed to be dragged down by this witchcraft that exceeded the limits of her body, and could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. As for the spider puppet beast that was chasing after the girl, it was instantly entangled by the strange light that overflowed from the void. A second ago, the spider puppet beast was a large metal structure that was 5 meters tall, 9 meters long, and weighed 300 tons. Its whole body was made of an excellent magic iron alloy that was equally resistant to both physical and magic, but in the next second, it was disintegrated in an instant. That's right. In the blink of an eye, this tall and mighty giant suddenly expanded and exploded, disintegrating into pieces, lumps and pieces of scattered metal parts, components and components. The whole metal structure was suspended in the air in a disintegrated state for 2 seconds, and then fell to the ground with a crash. Alice, who was sitting safely in the thick metal shell and riding the spider puppet beast a moment ago, sat paralyzed in a pile of scattered metal in the next moment, holding her head and screaming as she endured the rain of parts that fell on her head. Goblin magic pistons, Z50 mana refillers, high elastic pads, neuron springs, thinking amplification discs, flexible deflection discs, force field shield generators, and all kinds of magic gems, strange parts with completely different functions and shapes. Alice even saw the Eye of Petrification, the ruby, and some components of the demonic cannon in the rain of parts. Unfortunately, these things, when put together, might have been able to bring a certain degree of threat to the mysterious girl. But now they were all scattered on the ground, useless garbage. Fortunately, Alice's own energy fluctuations were extremely weak, and at first glance, she was not the type that could pose a threat to the battle. Therefore, the mysterious girl floated over her head, and did not stop to waste another terrifying prophecy for her. With the combat power of several of the main witches greatly reduced, the team surrounding the mysterious girl immediately fell into disarray. Their firepower was greatly reduced, and all the witches felt insecure. They wanted to work harder to kill this annoying guy as soon as possible, but at the same time, they were afraid that their performance would be too outstanding and they would become the other side's target. Judging from their current battle prowess, no one present was a match for this mysterious girl. If she was determined to kill someone, no one would be able to stop her. After almost a quarter of an hour, the team of witches, which had been full of energy just a moment ago, was reduced to 2 or 3 weak witches. Other than Alice, Sophia, and Chave, the rest of the witches were all taken down by the other party. Then, their bodies were incinerated, turning into a ball of colorful light that fused with the mysterious spell formation. At the core of the mysterious spell formation, a huge ball of light with a diameter of 2 meters had gathered. It hovered there, emitting a dense and powerful aura of destiny. Furthermore, everyone could clearly see that outside the spell formation, there would be balls of multicolored light drifting in from time to time. They would then be pulled along the mana threads and silently integrated into the huge ball of light. This was the so-called destiny witch induction ceremony. Among the awakened witches who entered the tower, as long as any of them successfully stepped into the spell formation and absorbed the power of destiny gathered within, they would become the new Destiny Witch. However, when absorbing the power of destiny, the witch in charge of the ceremony would definitely be in a defenseless state, and could easily be interrupted by external disturbances. Therefore, the safest course of action was to kill all the competitors, and nip all the dangers in the bud. And that was exactly what the mysterious girl had done. At this moment, the Tower of Destiny had long been locked. All the awakened who did not enter the Tower of Destiny in time would be crushed by the law of destiny and turned into the purest form of energy. They would then be swept into the mysterious spell formation by the power of destiny. As for their spiritual consciousness and souls, they were, of course, broken down into unconscious nourishment, used to nourish the new Witch of Destiny. Therefore, the competitors from the outside world no longer existed. They had all been turned into energy that could be absorbed and stored within the spell formation. Within the tower, the only surviving awakened ones of destiny were the four that stood before him. The mysterious girl, Sophia, Chave, and Alice among them. The mysterious girl was undoubtedly the most well-hidden big boss. Under her bloody and cruel oppression, the rest of the witches either died or perished, becoming a part of the light of the spell formation. As for Sophia, she had lost both her eyes. Although she still had her battle power, she could only chase after the mysterious girl clumsily like a blind bear. Even if she smashed the floor into ruins, she could not harm the other party at all. Chave's fierce long-range firepower was also suppressed by the mysterious girl. Any spell that required incantations and hand gestures was almost impossible to complete. Every time she yelled and looked like she was about to activate a large-scale spell, she would be stopped halfway by the mysterious girl's extremely simple headache, stomachache, mute, and other curses. If not for Chave's strong mental energy and the many protective spells she wore on her body, she would have been tormented by the other party to the point of tears and peeing. In comparison, Alice was the one who received the least amount of attack. Originally, among the three favored, Alice was the strongest. She had the Inferno Tyrant as a fighter on the outside, and the Spider Puppet Beast as a mount and bodyguard on the inside. With such strength and such a combination, she would have no problem fighting against the combination of Chave and Sophia at the same time. But now, the Inferno Tyrant had been exiled from the sorcerer's world, and it would be a long time before he could return. The Spider Puppet Beast was also torn apart by the mysterious girl's terrifyingly strong prophecy into a pile of spare parts and metal shards, and the price she paid was just a mouthful of blood. After losing these two protective treasures, Alice was instantly beaten back to her original state. She became the only female awakened who had no battle power other than her divination skills. If not for the fact that she had prepared some offensive spell scrolls that could be of some use, she might have become a harmless experience baby. From the current situation, the mysterious girl's performance was enough to crush the entire witch team. Unless a miracle happened, it was only a matter of time before the team was destroyed. At such a terrifying moment of life and death, any action of conserving strength was foolish. Thus, the three women were still communicating closely in the midst of battle. "What other tricks do you have? Hurry up and use them. Don't tell me you're prepared to bring those tricks to your graves?" Alice roared anxiously. "My Inferno Tyrant still has 10 minutes to get out of its exiled state, but I definitely won't be able to hold on until then." Left. 10 meters away. Even as she complained, Alice did not forget to point out the other party's position to Sophia. "This damned fellow only knows how to dodge. I can't catch up to her at all." Sophia had not even touched an inch of the mysterious girl's skin since the start of the battle. As a berserk witch who specialized in close combat, this was undoubtedly a huge humiliation. She was already beyond furious. "Hurry up and think of a way. Even if I have to perish together with this bastard, I'll do it. I still have an organ activation scroll here. I can transplant one of my eyes to you. This is considered an external planting spell, and it won't be immune to your magic resistance. Shefa floated shakily in the air, trying her best to shoot out pieces of ice and balls of cold air. She shouted angrily as she fought. Although her personality was reserved and cold, she was also filled with rage from being oppressed by the mysterious girl. She looked like she wanted to fight to the death with the other party. No, you can't lose any more combat power. Alice interrupted halfway. I'm the least useful now. Give me the scroll and give my eye to Sophia. Only she can help us take revenge. Hurry up, she's charging towards you again. Sophia shouted violently, the thick wooden staff in her hand chasing closely behind the mysterious girl. These three enemies who had been fighting to the death before actually had the moment to let go of their previous enmity under the pressure of a common enemy. They seriously and comprehensively considered for this small team of three. She took out a wizard's scroll with ancient patterns on its surface and threw it to Alice, who was not far behind her. Shefa gritted her teeth, her body slowly floating up. The ice element wizard spells that shot out from her hands were as dense as a storm, trapping the other party firmly in the distance. Sophia also waved her wooden staff and forced the mysterious girl away, running towards Alice with large strides. The strange behavior of the three had obviously aroused the mysterious girl's suspicions. Seeing Shefu throw an unknown scroll to Alice, and Sophia also moving towards that direction, she immediately raised her guard. Using the prophecy spell, the mysterious girl covered herself with a layer of ice immunity barrier and immediately chased after Sophia, pouncing towards Alice. No matter what the three wanted to do, she could not let them have their way. Seeing the two people pouncing towards her one after the other, Alice snapped the wizard's scroll with a ferocious expression. Taking advantage of the moment when the wizard energy surged on her body, Alice clenched her teeth and used her fingers to dig out her entire right eye, then threw it to Sophia with all her might. The intense pain tore Alice's heart apart, but at this moment the pain was nothing. The mysterious girl who was rapidly approaching in the air instantly understood the situation. A faint cold smile appeared on her face, and she raised her slender hand, aiming at the bloody eyeball that had been thrown halfway. Explode! But just as she made the prophecy, a slender figure suddenly blocked in front of her finger. In the next second, Shefu was thrown into the air, a large bloody hole suddenly exploding in her abdomen. Blood shot into the sky like a waterfall, splattering into a rain of blood. Sophia used her mental perception to see everything around her clearly. She grabbed the eyeball that Alice had thrown out and stuffed it into her empty eye socket. The stalk behind the round eyeball immediately extended thousands of hair-like tentacles, firmly fixing herself in place. A moment later. Chapter 374. She glanced at Alice, who was not far in front of her. She was as short as a 7 or 8-year-old child. At that moment, a large bloody hole suddenly appeared on her fair and delicate face. Blood spurted out of her eye socket, covering half of her face and dyeing half of her body red. At first glance, Alice looked like a doll that had been broken by someone. But she was still smiling sweetly at Sophia. Sophia's tall and muscular body suddenly turned around, and what she saw was a slender figure that suddenly floated down. A large bloody hole and dense cracks that resembled spiderwebs appeared on her crystal-clear body and skin. After the ice shield exploded, it turned into ice powder that filled the sky, mixing with the rain of blood that sprayed out like flowers of blood that suddenly bloomed. The heavy injuries that she had accumulated previously, in addition to her already delicate and fragile body, the former ice dancer Chave could no longer withstand such a violent and ferocious attack. The aura of life started to dissipate from this exquisite and perfect body. The first wisp of flame of destiny first appeared at her heart, and then quickly spread to the rest of her body. As Chave's life faded away, the mysterious young lady that was flying over was immediately revealed. Sophia, who had turned into a berserk witch, raised her head and let out a heart-wrenching roar. The thick wooden staff in her hand whistled through the air as she threw it out. She followed closely behind and pounced forward. The mysterious young lady was completely unaffected by Chave's death. Her gaze was completely attracted to the berserk witch Sophie. Seeing that the other party had launched a violent attack from so far away, the mysterious young lady's calm face revealed a mocking smile. As for the hatred and anger that surged between the insignificant ants in front of her, she completely ignored it. After all, she was a projection of the consciousness left behind by a high-level witch. She really could not care less about these low-level emotional exchanges and levels of power. So what if she exploded or not? If not for the burden of this body, with her abilities and control of the power of destiny, it would be a piece of cake for her to destroy this group of low-level witches. A crazed ant was still an ant. Could it turn into a beast and bite her? With a haughty and arrogant attitude, the mysterious young lady's body drifted and dodged the thick wooden staff that was flying toward her. She raised her slender fingers once again and aimed at Sophia, who was pouncing toward her. She's just a female warrior who only knows how to use brute force. I'll just kill her this time. However, before she could spit out the sentence of witchcraft, the thick wooden staff that brushed past her suddenly turned into a long python covered in dark green scales. The thick and long body stretched and actually wrapped around her. This unexpected turn of events caused the mysterious girl to turn pale with fright. Since they were both awakened of fate, it was extremely difficult to predict what the other party would do next with fate premonition. That was why the other party's change was so sudden that even the mysterious girl, who had always planned before taking action, was unable to guard against it. The long python that was animated by the thick wooden staff was clearly a strange monster. After its tough and thick body wrapped around the mysterious girl, it began to rapidly twist and bite. Unfortunately, the mysterious aura that lingered around the girl's body was tougher than all barriers and defenses. Even though the long python's sharp poisonous fangs sank deep into her skin, it could not pierce through the girl's soft skin that seemed to be fragile. With this buffer time, the mysterious girl was able to recite the words, "burn out." These were clearly two words that couldn't be any simpler, yet they contained a terrifying might that was unimaginable to outsiders. The demonized serpent, which was already a terrifying demon in the eyes of ordinary people, raised its neck and hissed at the monstrous demonic fire triggered by the word "burn out." The gaps between the scales on its thick and long serpent body were spewing black flames in a frenzy. The demonized long python twisted its body in pain, and the mysterious girl took the opportunity to escape from its entanglement. Just as she escaped, the mysterious girl saw an iron fist that was suddenly expanding. Block! Although the prophecy that was cast at the last minute did not gather enough power, it still perfectly blocked Sophia's violent iron fist. Boom! A transparent layer of light blocked between the iron fist and the mysterious girl's nose. Although it was as thin as a cicada's wing, it was as tough as the world's toughest steel. No matter how Sophia's iron fist rammed into it, causing her flesh to split open and blood to splatter, other than a slight dent, the light layer did not seem to be damaged at all. However, the dent in the light layer had clearly touched the mysterious girl's nose, causing her to feel a slight pain. Damned ants! The mysterious girl took a step back, gently rubbing her nose as she cursed viciously. Although her sentience had just sprouted and she didn't have much intelligence, she felt hatred and disgust from the bottom of her heart towards these ants who had offended her dignity. Perhaps it was better to use up some of the power of destiny in the spell formation to get rid of them as soon as possible. However, the power of destiny was the cornerstone for her to rise again. She would feel a faint heartache if she were to use it on this group of ants. Just as the mysterious girl's thoughts were wavering and she could not make up her mind, the light layer in front of her shook violently once again. The violent witch, who was charging forward, was obviously not willing to give up so easily. She actually hammered the light layer that was between her and the mysterious girl, one punch after another. If her fists were not enough, she would use her legs. If her legs were not enough, she would use her fists. Sophia attacked the light layer with all her might as if she had gone mad. Every hit was accompanied by a sudden blossoming of blood. The skin and flesh on the front of her fists had already cracked, revealing the white finger bones beneath the flesh. Sophia's forehead had also turned black and blue, and then became a bloody mess. However, she did not seem to feel it as she continued to hammer, kick, and hit crazily. Every time she attacked, there would be mysterious energy flowing on the light layer. The faster she attacked, the faster the mysterious energy was consumed. It was clear that the light layer, which had not moved at all, was now showing cracks and damage that could be seen with the naked eye. The speed at which the mysterious energy was repairing the damage could not keep up with Sophia's speed of destruction. With a sharp howl, Alice ran forward with a dagger in her hand. At this point in the battle, she had used up all the scrolls, potions, and magic artifacts that she could use. The only thing she could do now was to use her flesh and life to hit this hateful light layer. Alice also waved her dagger, stabbing and hitting the transparent light layer in a frenzy. Damn it, these two ants are crazy. She could not care less about what would happen next. The mysterious girl raised her slender hand slightly, preparing to once again draw some power of destiny from the mysterious wizard formation to protect herself. Unfortunately, at this moment, with a crisp crack, the light layer finally shattered. In the next second, Sophia's iron fist, which revealed her white bones, had already landed on the mysterious girl's chin. An even louder and crisper crack could be heard. The mysterious girl's eyes widened, revealing a look of astonishment, anger, and disbelief. Her chin was tilted to the side as it flew out. Unfortunately, before her body could fly half a meter, Sophia's other hand grabbed her right leg firmly and pulled her back. Under the mysterious girl's fearful and uneasy gaze, Sophia's mangled forehead expanded rapidly in front of her eyes. Thud, another dull thud. The terrifying sound of bones cracking could be heard at the same time. The mysterious girl felt as if she had collided with a mountain. A terrifying cracking sound came from her forehead, and it caved in slightly. The intense pain from the collision between her mouth and forehead quickly spread to the depths of her soul. The mysterious girl could not help but raise her neck and let out a heart-wrenching scream of pain. Along with the blood-curdling screams, 3 bloody teeth also burst out. Damn it, I can't fight with these ants. How could his own noble body? While these thoughts were still lingering in her mind, Sophia's broad body had once again expanded rapidly in front of her. She opened her arms, looking like she was going to give her a passionate hug. However, what did that gaping mouth and cold teeth mean? The mysterious girl did not even have time to think. Sophia had already collided with her, her arms tightly holding her in a death grip. Then, she opened her mouth and bit down. What kind of battle technique was this? The mysterious girl, who had been locked in place, was furious. With her hands locked, it was difficult for her to use her hand gestures to guide the power of destiny. Every time she wanted to open her mouth to recite the judgment of destiny, that crude and lowly female barbarian would fiercely smash her forehead into it. Her entire body seemed to have become the opponent's weapon that could be used at all costs. Under the repeated head blows, the mysterious girl's nose bridge broke, her eye sockets cracked, and her face caved in. Her entire face was a bloody mess, and blood flowed everywhere. Her original appearance could no longer be seen. Sophia's injuries were obviously greater than the mysterious girl's. However, she seemed to be used to this kind of battle. Even though she was more injured with every collision, she still continued to smash into her opponent without a care. Not far away, Alice also crawled up from the ground and pounced forward with a dagger in her hand. A mournful howl filled with immense power instantly rang through the entire tower. An extremely terrifying power burst forth from the mysterious girl's body, and easily blew Alice away. Meanwhile, Sophia, who was tightly locking her body down, was also shattered inch by the powerful force. Her arms were twisted into soft noodles and then turned into minced meat that splattered all over the sky. Sophia's sturdy body flew far away. While she was still in the air, the power of destiny in her body had already started to burn. Although the three of them had already used their greatest strength, it was a pity that all their struggles and efforts were meaningless against an enemy that was so powerful that they could not fight against it. The enemy's power was not something that they could fight against. There was a dull thud. Sophia's body bounced a few times on the ground, and she slid nearly 100 meters away before she stopped moving. She was tattered and lifeless. "Even if I die, I'll beat you until your face is covered in peach blossoms." Chapter 375. Sophia was dead. Following the death of the ice dancer Chave, the violent and wild Sophia had also died. In the hall, at this moment, only Alice and the mysterious girl were left. When the mysterious girl slowly turned towards Alice in midair, Alice was able to see her deformed skull and bloody face. Her face looked as if it had been trampled by 100 elephants. All the protruding parts were flattened in the most barbaric and violent way. The bridge of her nose was broken and twisted beyond recognition. Her mouth was swollen, and from the defect, it seemed that most of her teeth had fallen out. The eye sockets were broken, and the purplish-black blood mixed with some of the tissue had completely covered the left eye. Only the bloodshot right eye was still radiating hatred and tyranny. As the sole projection left behind by the former Witch of Destiny, her actions were simply a disgrace to the senior witches. She, who had thousands of years of experience that far surpassed her competitors, and also had partial control of the Tower of Destiny, was actually beaten up by a low-level witch with the most clumsy means. This simply made her hazy consciousness, which had just awakened, extremely angry. She was angry, she was irritable, and she desperately needed to vent, but the initiator was already dead. Letting her, the future Witch of Destiny, whip the corpse. This was simply another form of humiliation. Therefore, she immediately cast a hateful gaze on the only survivor, Alice. Perhaps reading the psychological projection of the mysterious girl's gaze, Alice stared at her, but still stood straight. Her short and small body was covered with small scratches, and half of her face was covered in thick blood stains, but she was still smiling sweetly in happiness. "I won't give you the chance to take revenge." As soon as she finished speaking, the dagger in Alice's right hand fiercely pierced into her heart. The petite body froze for a moment, and finally slowly fell. Dark red blood quickly soaked the floor under Alice's body. "Damn it, damn it, damn it! What kind of people are there in this batch of awakened ones? Why are they so difficult to deal with? Damn it!" Sensing that the life force in Alice's body was gradually weakening until it completely disappeared, the unquenchable anger in the bottom of the mysterious girl's heart turned into a blazing flame, burning her dizzy and so angry that her chest was about to explode. She scanned the hall and the entire tower once more. After confirming that there were no longer any signs of life within the tower, the mysterious young lady suppressed her boiling emotions and turned to walk towards the mysterious spell formation. Since everything was settled, the most important thing now was to quickly become a real Destiny Witch. At the very least, the fate energy gathered here could push her to Tier 3 or even Tier 4. Perhaps in less than 1,000 years, she would be able to step out of the Magus world and merge with her own body. However, just as she was about to step into the mysterious sorcerer's array, a sudden sense of danger caused her to stop in her tracks. Danger. Moreover, it was a terrifying danger that could bring about a catastrophe to her. The mysterious girl slowly turned around and began to seriously scan the battlefield again. The anger in her heart had been completely extinguished by the ice-cold premonition of fate. In the face of life, what was face and humiliation? Before entering the mysterious spell formation and letting go of everything to absorb the fate energy, she had to completely extinguish all signs and signs that could bring about harm to herself. This was the quality that a leader must have. What exactly was the problem? All the competitors in the tower had been killed, so where would the enemy that could deal a fatal blow to her be hiding? As she pondered, the mysterious girl used her remaining eye to slowly scan the desolate battlefield. The floor of the entire hall had been shattered and cracked, and there were fragments of stone slabs and strange objects everywhere. The witches' bodies had all been incinerated by the fate energy, leaving behind only fragments of magic staffs, magic wands, scrolls, and a few discarded potion bottles. Of course, there was also a large pile of metal parts that flickered with a faint blue luster and incomplete rune parts. There were even some magic gems with residual energy mixed in. Other than that, there were the corpses of the 3 women who had just died and corpses? At this moment, the mysterious girl suddenly came to a realization. How could there be corpses? Once the 3 women died, their bodies would be incinerated by the fate energy in their bodies into the purest form of energy and thrown into the spell formation. Not only their bodies, but even their souls would not be able to escape. Everything would become the foundation and nourishment for the rise of the new witches of fate. But why were the corpses of the 3 women still intact at this moment? Unless they were not dead at all, and were still using their willpower to resist the fate energy in their bodies. The mysterious girl's expression changed slightly. She raised her hands and softly chanted, "In the name of the great law of fate, please bestow upon me the eye of truth that can see through all lies." The mysterious spell formation trembled, and once again projected a wave of fate energy onto the mysterious girl's body. The hall in front of her suddenly disappeared, all the objects in her field of vision seemed to have lost their outlines, and instead appeared as mottled patches of color and threads of spiritual energy that intertwined with each other. The original field of vision was replaced by a new sensing method, appearing in the mysterious girl's eyes. Under the penetration of the eye of truth, Xuefu's broken body did not have any signs of life. However, a crystal pendant hung on her neck, and strangely, there was a small person that looked exactly like her sealed inside. This small person sat in a thick crystal, and an uncountable amount of strange white fog surrounded her. It was precisely this layer of white fog that prevented ordinary witchcraft from detecting and perceiving her, allowing her to hide until now. However, at this moment, through the white fog, through the crystal wall, the mysterious girl's gaze met with the small Xuefu. The small Xuefu's face instantly turned pale. A crisp sound rang out. The crystal exploded, and the thick white fog engulfed Xuefu's body. A moment later, a fully intact Xuefu, wrapped in layers of protection, walked out. Her crystal-clear face was filled with seriousness that could not be erased. It was obvious that she was filled with unwillingness and despair that her methods had been seen through by the enemy. Damned little bugs, as expected, all of these despicable methods. A cold smile formed on the mysterious girl's face. "You 2 bastards, do you want me to drag you out one by one?" When the mysterious girl's gaze landed on Sophia's broken body, her gaze focused on the pinky on her right hand. Due to the previous violent blows, white bones were revealed, and one could faintly see strange dark green patterns on them. Life hiding. This seemed to be a technique unique to the necromancers. Life hiding was a special technique that could isolate a portion of one's life force and hide it in a certain part of one's body. When one's body suffered a fatal blow, one could choose a place or revive on the spot. However, Sophia's life hiding was far inferior to the wizard weapon that Xuefu had used. At least when Sophia's hidden life force spread back into her broken body and stood up, she still had to bear the reality that her body had been smashed into pieces. Following this, everyone's gaze landed on Alice's thin and petite body. With a sigh, the dagger that was stabbed into Alice's heart slowly withdrew. Then, Alice opened her mouth and spat out a piece of fruit that was in her mouth. The golden apple. The few of them nodded, finally understanding how Alice had faked her death. The golden apple was also a tool used in the resurrection ritual. Before something happened, One only needed to bite off a piece of the golden apple and hold it in their mouth. Then, no matter how severe the injuries, non-destructive, they would not be fatal. Good, very good. The mysterious young woman looked around and saw that the 3 awakened ones who should have died to her had stood up. A feeling of rage, as though she had been deceived, welled up within her. Since you all want to die one more time, I will grant you your wish. With that, a large ball of fluorescent light surged out from the mysterious spell formation, pouring into her wounded body. Recover. After a short spell, the mysterious girl's body was enveloped by a strange spatial ripple. When the spatial ripple disappeared, all the injuries on her body had disappeared as well. Standing in front of Alice and the other 2 girls was an enemy who had recovered completely. Looking at this scene, Alice and the other 2 girls had ugly expressions, even with a hint of despair. Compared to the huge ball of light in the mysterious spell formation, the mysterious girl had not even used 1/10 of it. However, this little bit of power of destiny was enough for her to easily crush the 3 of them. With such an enemy and such a battle, was there any meaning in fighting to the death? There was no answer, and there was no need for an answer. At this moment, the first to stand up was still Sophia. Regardless of whether you have any other tricks up your sleeves, I will definitely fight to the death. Although Sophia's body was recovering quickly, compared to the huge injuries on her body, no matter how strong her physical body's recovery ability was, it was of no use. We berserk witches do not wait to die. With that, she forced her injured body to charge towards the mysterious girl once again. Alice and Chave looked at each other, a terrifying will to die growing in their hearts. They followed closely behind Sophia and launched their final attack on the mysterious girl. Unfortunately, everything they had was swallowed up by the huge difference in their abilities. With just the words, "indestructible," the mysterious girl erected a transparent barrier that could never be broken in front of the 3 of them. No matter how they attacked, how they punched and kicked, they could not damage it at all. Ulceration. Double the pain. Aging. As the mysterious girl's prophecies were released, Chave, who bore the brunt of the attack, fell down in pain. Her face seemed to have suddenly crossed several hundred years. In the blink of an eye, she had turned from a young girl with tender skin into an old woman with dark skin and an old face. When she raised her head and howled in pain on the ground, what came out of her mouth was not a shrill scream, but a cloud of black dust. Chapter 376. With the experience from the first round, how could the mysterious girl give them a second chance? From the start, the mysterious girl had restrained her use of the power of destiny. One of the main reasons was, this was all nourishment for her future rise. If everything went smoothly, and she easily killed these competitors, then the power of destiny could help her break through the terrifying threshold of level 4. But if she used up too much now, and was unable to reach level 4 by a hair's breadth when she advanced, it would be a huge blow to her. In the Sorcerer Continent, the difference between level 3 and level 4 was like the difference between heaven and earth. If such a situation really happened, she would probably cry herself to death. But the 3 competitors in front of her were like cockroaches and cockroaches, and she had no choice but to drain large amounts of the power of destiny to protect herself. This caused her to feel an intense pain in her heart as she swept through her enemies. But no matter how much her heart ached, she did not want to experience the humiliation of being ganged up on by her enemies again. The power of destiny from the water rack flowed out from her hands, turning into terrifying spells that were used on the 3 women. Almost effortlessly, the mysterious girl once again put the 3 women to the ground. But this time, she did not hesitate to kill Sophia directly. Looking at the berserk witch's body that had started to burn violently after falling to the ground, Alice could only drag her wounded body to the weak Chef. She lifted Chef's head and gently placed it on her lap. Even such a gentle movement caused Chefu's purplish-black mouth to overflow with a foul stench of blood. "Let's say our final farewell." The mysterious girl's body was surrounded by colorful light as she slowly floated towards the two women. I will kill the two of you very carefully. It's you three bastards who caused me to lose so much power of destiny. I will squeeze every drop of power of destiny out of your bodies bit by bit. Faced with the mysterious girl's threat, Alice bent down and moved closer to Shefa's ear, using telepathy to communicate softly. Can you still put up the ice crystal defense? Shefa's voice was weak but firm. Of course I can. But do we still have a chance of victory? Don't worry, just listen to my instructions. Once I give the order, you must do your best to support the defensive barrier. The private exchange between the two women had obviously attracted the attention of the mysterious girl. Although the strength of these two low-level witches was so weak that they could not withstand a single blow, somehow, they always gave her a sense of extreme danger. As a result, the mysterious girl immediately made up her mind. Even if she had to expend a bit more of her power of destiny, she was going to kill these two mercilessly. The mysterious girl floated alone in midair. The power of fate around her quickly flowed and mysteriously disappeared. Meanwhile, her small mouth opened slightly. A witchcraft spell that had been prepared for a long time was about to ring out in this world. But in the telepathic communication between Alice and Shave, a weak but determined voice rang softly. 3-1 almost at the same time when Alice counted to 1, some unexpected changes suddenly occurred in this witchcraft hall. The void suddenly began to tremble and fluctuate, and a tall, mighty, and terrifying shadow of a flaming man slowly emerged. Inferno Tyrant. It finally got rid of the mysterious girl's banishment, and returned from the different dimension. The moment she saw the Inferno Tyrant's enormous body, the mysterious young lady instantly understood that she had been negligent. The Inferno Tyrant was only banished, but not destroyed. When the effects of the banishment spell disappeared, he would naturally return here. But as long as the summoner was destroyed in time, the summoned creature would naturally disappear. This was something that almost every witch who knew witchcraft knowledge was well aware of. But because the mysterious young lady was too confident in herself in the past, she never believed that Alice could still hold on until the moment the Inferno Tyrant returned. So, she did not take this to heart. Thus, at this moment, when she suddenly saw the Inferno Tyrant, whose entire body was raging with flame power, her heart suddenly jumped. Not good, this little girl was planning to. The changes in the field did not allow the parties involved to think twice before acting. The Inferno Tyrant had already been ordered by Alice to self-destruct almost at the same time he appeared. Thus, under the mysterious young lady's shocked and furious gaze, a small sun slowly rose behind her. There were no shockwaves or airwaves. The entire space was filled with a terrifying red glow that one could not look directly at, and the temperature in the air rose rapidly, very quickly reaching a level that would make one speechless. There were violent fire elements everywhere, and the terrifying heavenly fire ignited everything that could be ignited within one's field of vision. The sky was burning, the earth was burning, and even the empty void was burning intensely. Under the intense flame energy radiation, the surface of the entire witchcraft hall was melting and softening rapidly, and thick black smoke was emitting. Even the magic-resistant stones could not withstand the terrifying radiation of the flames. Those scattered pieces of flesh and broken limbs were quickly charred, carbonized, and disintegrated at a speed visible to the naked eye, until there was no flesh left. Even with the protection of the power of destiny, the mysterious young lady who bore the brunt of the attack still had crimson flames appearing on her fluttering long hair and the corners of her clothes. The air became scalding hot, and a casual breath would ignite one's trachea and alveolus. The terrifying heavenly fire rushed out from the place where the Inferno Tyrant had self-destructed, and quickly engulfed all the surrounding places. Of course, it did not let go of the mysterious young lady, who was frozen in mid-air, and the Chave Alice, who was crouching on the ground. A thick ice crystal froze the two of them inside, and as the cave's ice power surged out, it kept getting thicker and firmer. But after a moment, the terrifying radiation of the flames swept over, and the ice crystal kept rolling outwards. The ice crystal even let out a terrifying explosion of ice and fire. Outside the wizard tower, Grimm raised his head in shock. The rest of the witches from the various factions also raised their heads in shock. The Tower of Destiny, which had been calm all this while, suddenly shook violently. Two huge cracks that ran through the entire body of the tower split open, and violent fire elements leaked out of the tower, burning the sky red. The Inferno Tyrant! Grimm muttered something under his breath. Others might not be able to guess what had happened in the tower, but Grimm knew clearly. The Inferno Tyrant had self-destructed. Some trouble beyond the normal scope must have happened in the Tower of Destiny, or else Alice would not have chosen to let the Inferno Tyrant self-destruct. Grimm could not care less about the fact that he had lost his strongest elemental demon puppet. Endless doubts and worries suddenly rose in his heart. The situation must have gone out of control. Inside the Witchcraft Hall, the battlefield, which was already a mess, had now completely turned into a terrifying field of fire. Everything that was not protected by witchcraft had been roasted into semi-liquid, viscous lava by the terrifying high temperature and flames. Only a few spots on the scattered piles of rubble were barely enough for Shui-Fu and Alice to curl up on, bitterly enduring the high temperature and the invasion of the flames. If not for the remaining ice crystals beneath them that were continuously emitting traces of coldness, just the high temperature in the air would have been enough to kill them. Just as they were looking around for traces of the mysterious girl, the lava in front of them split to the left and right, and a strange figure that was completely charred black walked towards the two of them with determined steps. Damn it, I knew that this kind of attack would not be able to kill her. Shui-Fu angrily propped up her body, still wanting to resist stubbornly. But when the other party announced death, she silently fell to the ground and slowly slid into the pool of lava. Amidst the strange sizzling sounds of flesh and blood burning and the stench, Alice had just straightened her body when a large, charred black hand tightly grabbed her throat. Alice's figure was short, and she was actually lifted into the air by the other party, only her limbs were left struggling with all their might. Good. Very good. There's only the two of us left. The charred black figure opened its mouth and spat out a scorching heat wave. I won't let you die. I will burn your body, keep your soul, and then turn you into a puppet of fate. You will suffer the cruelest and most vicious torture for generations to come. I won't let you die like this. Alice's throat was grabbed, and she could only struggle and let out muffled sounds. What? Before you say goodbye to this body, do you have anything else you want to say? The charred black figure was obviously beyond furious. If she did not find a strong enough enemy to vent the hatred in her heart, she was afraid that she would explode from anger. In order to listen to Alice's final cries, the charred black figure finally loosened its grip a little. Alice's hands gripped the other party's wrist tightly, and a smile suddenly appeared on her originally terrified face. Thank you for letting me touch your body. Goodbye. The next moment, a mysterious space energy suddenly surged out of Alice's body, who had appeared harmless from beginning to end, and wrapped around the charred black figure's body at lightning speed. The other party still has the strength to resist? The mysterious young lady, who was neither human nor ghost from the self-destruction, was shocked, and the remaining power of fate in her body quickly turned into an indestructible defense. After the defense barrier appeared, the mysterious young lady immediately felt relieved. This defense was something that the three of them could not break even if they joined forces. How could this little lass hurt her through the defense barrier? But before this thought could fully surface in her mind, the mysterious young lady's vision blurred, and the scenery around her changed completely. The sky that was burning red, the boundless barren land in front of her, the tall Wizard of Fate tower behind her, and the northern witches who were looking at her in shock from different locations, D***eminent, this is outside the tower. Suddenly understanding, the mysterious young lady immediately let out an ear-piercing scream, turned around and pounced toward the wizard's pagoda. But it was too late. A powerful will, majestic and ancient, suddenly locked onto her position. In the next second, the power of fate in her body quickly turned into a terrifying flame, wrapping her whole body in it. The power of fate that was usually under her control, as docile as a servant, had now become the culprit that took her life. They instantly turned into the world's most terrifying and ferocious bandits, igniting every inch of her flesh and blood. She turned into a pure energy substance in fear and regret, then slowly floated into the Tower of Fate. All the senior witches and Grimm looked at each other, puzzled by what was happening in front of them. Chapter 377. Within the Wizard Hall. Alice was trembling. She had forcefully gouged out an eye, and had endured so many wizard spells. The pressure on her small and weak body had long reached its limit. From afar, Alice looked like a broken doll that had been abandoned by its little owner. There was not a single part of her body that was intact. After waiting for a long time, shivering, Alice finally confirmed that the mysterious young lady would never return. This allowed her heart to finally be at ease. In her mind, the mysterious young lady was an invincible being. She was not someone that a group of low-level witches like them could deal with. Just as Alice was sitting on a pile of rubble in a daze, with her scarred hands around her shoulders, a dazzling light that was far more intense than before floated into the hall along the wizard formation's spiritual energy threads, slowly merging with the ball of light at the core. There was a strange item mixed in the dazzling light. It was not disintegrated by the power of destiny, but stubbornly floated outside the ball of light. It was extremely eye-catching. After a long period of psychological buffering, Alice finally broke free from her deep fear and cowering. She slowly stood up, looking at the giant ball of light in the mysterious wizard formation with an infatuated gaze. The mysterious young lady's consciousness and soul had been completely wiped out by the dimension laws, and had been restored to the purest form of energy. The mysterious wizard formation, which had lost control of its consciousness, also opened its arms to Alice, the only victor, for the first time. This mysterious wizard formation was closely linked to the entire Tower of Destiny, so this meant that the Tower of Destiny had tacitly acknowledged Alice's identity. Once she entered the wizard formation and absorbed this portion of the power of destiny, Alice would officially become the new Witch of Destiny. And Alice, who had control over the Wizard Tower of Destiny, also gained a preliminary understanding of the entire matter through the information stored in the Wizard Pagoda's core. The reason why there was such a huge mess in the selection of the Witch of Destiny this time was because of the first Witch of Destiny. When her abilities surpassed the limits of the wizard world, and she was forced to enter the Sea of Stars, she made an equivalent exchange with the wizard world's will like the other northern witches. She left the wizard world as promised, and the wizard world allowed her to imprint a portion of her inheritance into the dimension laws. Generation after generation, it would be passed on forever, never to be cut off. However, this was only what she did on the surface. Out of selfishness and coveting the power of destiny within the sorcerer world, the first Witch of Destiny deliberately set up the Tower of Destiny and the Struggle of Destiny, and then hid part of her soul in the tower. In this way, every once in a while, when it was time to select a Destiny Witch, her soul fragment hidden in the Tower of Destiny would try to occupy the body of an awakened, and then use her identity to sneak into the battle of destiny. This way, no matter who won or lost, the destiny which that was produced would mix with her hidden soul consciousness. Every destiny which was actually the seed of the first destiny which, quietly nurturing, germinating, growing, and strengthening in the sorcerer world. When she finally had the ability to step out of the sorcerer world, the part of consciousness left in the soul of each destiny which would guide her to fuse with the first destiny witch. Of course, such behavior was not permitted by the world will. However, with the Tower of Fate's dense fate power as a cover, the mechanical and rigid plane of existence's law that operated according to the rules couldn't see through the secrets of the Tower of Fate. That was why the secret of the first destiny which had been continued for so long. However, just now, Alice used the Inferno Tyrant's self-destruction to blow up a crack in the Tower of Fate, and then used the teleportation power given to her after fusing with the Void Stone to send the mysterious girl out of the tower. This was also equivalent to completely exposing the secrets of the first destiny which to the fate law. Therefore, the other party immediately triggered the strongest plane of existence's backlash. After being purified by the plane of existence's law, for the first time in history, the destiny witch advancement ceremony without the interference of the former witch's soul consciousness appeared. When Alice finally stood in the light ball condensed by the power of destiny, two mysterious options suddenly appeared in her mind. The first option, infusion of strength, directly absorb the power of destiny in the light ball, and then improve the individual's strength. It was estimated that the power in the light ball could directly promote her to a level 3 destiny witch. The second option, increase potential. Give up on using the power of destiny in the light ball to improve strength, but use it to expand talent potential. It was estimated that there would be a comprehensive and huge improvement to the existing potential. Alice was silent. The two options in front of her made her completely immersed in deep thought. She could sense that this was the plain feedback that the world will brought to her after she killed the mysterious girl. Without that premise, she was afraid that there would only be the first option in front of her, and there would never be a second option. From this point of analysis, choosing to increase potential was undoubtedly the wisest move. But if she really did this, it would mean that Alice would become the first person to advance to a destiny which as a level 1. This would undoubtedly break the current power structure of the Northern Witches, making everything chaotic and blurry. If Alice stepped out of the Tower of Fate as a level 3 or even a level 4 destiny witch, then there was no doubt that there would be a seat for her in the Witch Council, and the territory and resources that belonged to the Destiny Witches in the past would also be taken back untouched. But a level 1 Destiny Witch leader, perhaps what awaited her would be a long and painful process of rising up. So the right path was bound to be accompanied by thorns. In contrast, the first option would bring her more convenience and gains. Although the power of fate had been squandered by the mysterious girl, and she could not reach level 4, a level 3 destiny which would also have a lot of say within the Northern Witches, and her future days would be much easier. The difference between the two was like heaven and earth. After thinking for a long time, Alice finally took out the Hikila resonating crystal and tried to contact Grimm. It had to be said that the Inferno Tyrant's self-destruction in the core area of the Tower of Fate had brought a lot of damage to the Tower of Fate. If it was during the past Battle of Fate, it would have been impossible to get any communication between the inside and outside of the tower. Through Alice's simple explanation, Grimm quickly grasped the situation in the tower. To be honest, the way the Battle of Fate had developed to this point, even Grimm, who was an outsider, was secretly shocked. It was not Grimm and Alice's turn to worry about the scheme of the ancient witches. Their biggest problem at the moment was how to choose the path of advancement. Grimm also instantly understood that Alice had already made her choice long ago. It was only for the sake of continuing their cooperation in the future that she specifically came to ask for his opinion as a sign of respect. And this was actually in line with his long-term interests. Therefore, Grimm chose to support Alice's advancement without hesitation. With Grimm's support, Alice finally made up her mind. But before that, she secretly borrowed a part of the power of fate to do something, and then chose the second option. Outside the Tower of Fate, the sky suddenly changed in an amazing way. The fire elements that densely covered the sky were swept away, and a huge funnel vortex suddenly appeared in the void. The bottom of the funnel continued to extend downwards, and gradually connected with the top of the Tower of Fate. A strong repulsive force came pressing down, and Grim had no choice but to retreat 3 miles away with the other high-grade witches. He watched the changes in the Tower of Fate from afar. Needless to say, all the witches present knew that this was the new destiny witch enjoying the fruits of her victory. Perhaps in a few hours the northern witches would welcome a new witch leader. And as the representatives of the major witches, they naturally had to offer gifts and enthusiasm to welcome this sister to join them. In particular, a few factions close to the Destiny Witches' territory wanted to meet with this new witch leader as soon as possible to discuss the division and ownership of the territory. After all, thousands of years had passed. Due to the severed inheritance of the Destiny Witches, their traditional territory had long been occupied by other factions. Now that the return of the Destiny Witches was imminent, a lot of things that had been swallowed in their stomach had to be spat out, so the entire northern witches were inevitably going to be in turmoil. If things went wrong, the entire witch council might be reshuffled. Seeing that the abnormality in the sky was becoming more and more obvious, many high-grade witches gathered together and began to discuss who the new destiny witch would belong to and what kind of strength she would have. If the new destiny witch was only level 3, then this group of level 2 and level 3 high-grade witches would be enough to negotiate with her on an equal footing, and there would even be room for bargaining when it came to matters such as returning the territory and returning the people. After all, the new destiny witch was alone. If she wanted to establish a foothold again, there was nothing she could do without the support of the witches of the various factions. So there were still many issues that could be discussed. However, if the new destiny witch was a Tier 4 witch, then the team before him could only serve as the advance party to send gifts and congratulate the new witch. Only the leaders of the various families would be able to negotiate with the new witch on equal footing. In this kind of situation, Grim's existence was extremely awkward. Although he had already learned the inside story of the tower in advance, he could not leak any information before Alice officially became a Destiny Witch. Especially when he felt the cold stare of the Enchanting Witch among the Deception Witches, Grim immediately began to think about how to deal with it. The Enchanting Witch was called Rena, and she was the mother of Frost Dancer Chef. If the one who walked out of the Tower of Destiny was not Chef, Grim could not guarantee that the exasperated fellow would not do anything. 4 hours passed in the blink of an eye as everyone waited anxiously. The gate of the tower finally opened slowly again. This time, it was really opened, instead of being covered by a light film like the last time. The witches could not help but hold their breaths, silently waiting for the final result. Inside the gate, a figure flashed, and a beautiful figure wearing a long dress appeared in front of everyone. "It's her, it's actually her." Chapter 378. It was a beautiful woman dressed in a purple starry robe. Her silky silver hair draped over her shoulders, and her face was unusually gentle and tranquil. However, the pair of azure eyes in her long and narrow almond-shaped eyes gave off an exceptionally enchanting and mysterious feeling. "Alice, how come it's you? Where's Chef?" Rena, the Deception Witch, stepped forward and asked in a trembling voice. Although Alice's appearance had changed dramatically, and she was no longer an 8-year-old girl, for the group of high-grade witches in front of her, that familiar mental fluctuation was the best calling card. The rest of the Deception Witches showed a sad look on their faces. They all knew very well in their hearts. There was only one witch who could walk out of the Tower of Fate alive. As for those who did not, the colorful lights floating in the sky before were the best explanation. Why are you only level 1? Unlike the Deception Witches who were more concerned about Chef, the witches of the other factions were actually more concerned about the strength of the new Destiny Witches. Rank 3 and Rank 4 meant that they had to take different measures to deal with it. But with a glance, all the witches turned pale with fright. Alice, who walked out of the Tower of Fate, she was actually only level 1. "Are you here to congratulate me on becoming a Destiny Witch, or to question me?" Alice's appearance this time was very likely to be her original appearance. Without the pretense of maturity that she had when she was a little girl, facing these Level 2 and Level 3 senior witches, not only did she not have the slightest stage fright, but her speech and behavior revealed a trace of the unique arrogance and strength of a superior. The witches all showed a look of hesitation on their faces. Such a thing had never happened in the history of the Northern Witches. Moreover, the witches of the major factions had always helped each other and almost never interfered with the internal affairs of the witches of the other faction. So seriously speaking, whether Alice was Level 1 or Level 4 after advancing to a destiny which was actually an internal matter of the Destiny Witches and had nothing to do with others. Therefore, in the face of Alice's harsh words, the witches hesitated for a moment before silently bowing to her. Even if the other party really had something wrong, only the leaders of the factions had the right to question her. In the end, they were just here to run errands and familiarize themselves with him. The first to stand out was naturally the Dark Witch, who had always been on good terms with the Destiny Witches. A Tier 3 witch named Kelly stepped forward and nodded slightly in greeting. "Congratulations, Lady Alice, for becoming the new Destiny Witch of the Northern Witches. On behalf of Leader Circe of the Dark Witches, I offer you 7 apprentice witches, 2 resource points, 3 human manners, and 700 servants and slaves." As Kelly the witch chanted aloud, a parchment with a list of gifts slowly flew towards Alice. Naturally, she accepted it with a smile. The next to appear was naturally the Death Witches, who were on good terms with the Destiny Witches. A middle-aged female Tier 2 witch stepped forward and nodded at Alice in greeting. "Congratulations, Lady Alice. As the representative of the leader of the Witches of Death, Thuna, I extend my sincere congratulations to you. In addition, the Death Witches have also brought a congratulatory gift. 6 apprentice witches, 3 resource points, 2 human cities, 1 plantation manor, and 600 servants and slaves." Alice was satisfied with the list of gifts that the Witches of Death had brought. With the 2 major witch factions stepping forward to set the tone, although the other witch factions were somewhat hesitant, they also stepped forward one after another to express their congratulations and present the gift list. Even the Deceit Witches were no exception. However, considering the situation of the leading witch, Rena, they sent another witch to read the gift list in her place. Rena stood in the crowd with a pale face, her emotions extremely unstable. Rena was a Tier 2 witch, while Alice, who had killed her daughter, was only a Tier 1 witch. At this moment, Alice stood before Rena with her head held high, accepting the congratulations of the many witches and gifts. And all of this should have belonged to her daughter, Cheval. "No. I will never admit your identity." Rena, who could not bear it any longer, roared angrily, "You murderer who killed my daughter!" Rena's outburst immediately caused the scene to become chaotic. Although Alice was only a Tier 1 witch, she still represented the Witch of Destiny. If Rena's attitude represented the will of the entire Deceit Witch faction, then it also meant that the unity and cooperation that the Northern Witches had created would be broken. The Northern Witches factions were likely to fall into a protracted civil war. A few Deceit Witches hurriedly stopped the emotional Rena, to prevent her from suddenly attacking the newly promoted Witch of Destiny. Sensing Rena's hostility, Alice took a small step back, and colorful radiance emanated from her body. Amidst the blinding fluorescence, exquisite tarot cards with the scales of fate carved on the backs of the cards appeared abruptly, circling around Alice and rotating slowly. At the same time, the Tower of Destiny behind Alice let out a loud rumble. A powerful witchcraft energy crossed the air and pressed down on all the witches, causing them to shiver. All the previous judgments were based on historical records and ancient legend. At this moment, everyone truly understood the meaning of the leader of the witches. Even if Alice only had the strength of a Tier 1 witch, as long as she was still a Witch of Destiny, then in the area covered by the Tower of Fate, she was fully deserving of the title of Queen. If anyone wanted to touch her here, they would have to first attack the Tower of Fate. In particular, A few older witches looked at the tarot cards that were constantly moving around Alice, their faces filled with excitement. Obviously, this reminded them of some of the legends of the previous Witches of Destiny. Witches of Destiny, Witches of Destiny, were terrifying witches who controlled fate. Their individual combat power might be a mess, but no one was willing to be enemies with them. They were a group of strange existences that had jumped out of the world's rules, wandering in the long river of fate, and could rely on their own strength to see the development of fate. Divination and predicting good or bad luck were all child's play. Their greatest ability was to change fate, to change the fate of others. They didn't need to weave or sketch out a new fate for others, but only needed to gently push the node of your fate, pushing you from the safe, smooth, and predictable path of fate to a fork full of dangers and thorns. Therefore, people who offended the Witches of Destiny would be very unlucky, very unlucky, very unlucky. From then on, good luck would no longer be with you. Because every time before good luck came, you would already be secretly pushed to another fork by them, and you would still be ignorant. Their strength might be very weak, but they could pry the direction of the long river of fate outside of your perception. Therefore, when Raina showed malice towards Alice, the power of fate represented by Alice immediately reacted. A kind of fate aura assaulted their faces, causing all the witches present to secretly palpitate. No wonder no one dared to invade the Tower of Fate, even though the inheritance of the Witches of Destiny had been severed for thousands of years. It turned out that there was such a powerful hidden power inside. All the witches nodded silently, vaguely understanding something. Alice looked at the agitated Raina, who was full of grief and indignation, and suddenly smiled. "Do you still want to see Chave?" Alice casually threw out a photographic crystal. "Why don't you take a look at this first?" Hearing that, Raina's body trembled slightly. She took the crystal and focused on the contents inside. After a moment, she raised her head in surprise and asked, the contents, are all real? You can stay later and verify it yourself." Alice's expression was rather complicated. Then, Alice turned to the witches and said lightly, "The Tower of Fate has just opened, and everything inside needs to be cleaned up urgently. Therefore, I won't be inviting everyone in for a tour. The gifts that the representatives just sent can be delivered slowly, but the promised apprentice witches must be sent over as soon as possible. I'll have to trouble everyone to do so." Hearing Alice's intention to send them off, all the witches looked at each other and turned to leave. A few of the deception witches discussed for a while, and left after leaving Raina behind. Soon, only Alice, Rena, Grimm, and a Witch of Death were left in the field. Alice couldn't help but look at the Witch of Death, who stayed behind on her own accord, puzzled. "My name is Hila, I'm Sophia's aunt. I know that casually asking about the Battle of Fate is offensive to the new Witch of Fate. But I still want to know where Sophia is. If she's really dead, then I'll give up." Seeing Alice's expression, the Tier 2 Death Witch, whose face was hidden under the shadow of her hood, slowly revealed her intentions. Sophia was indeed related to the Death Witches. Alice and Grimm exchanged glances and nodded silently. "Since both of you want to know the current situation of your loved ones, follow me. Your Excellency Grimm, please come with me." Alice nodded and smiled at the three of them, then turned around and walked through the gate of the Tower of Fate. The three of them entered the tower one after another. Raina was obviously in a hurry, so she took the lead. The Witch of Death walked in the middle of the group with a strange-looking magic staff in her hand. Grimm was the weakest, so he could only rub his nose and silently walk at the back. The moment they entered the tower, they felt a strong sense of vicissitudes. A thick layer of dust covered the ground, stone pillars, bookshelves, and walls. Everywhere they went, they could see collapsed bookshelves and wooden boxes. Large amounts of enchanted vines grew in a disorderly manner, turning the Witchcraft Hall on the first floor into a sinister botanical garden. Chapter 379. Even though a day had passed since the battle, the traces left behind could still be seen clearly. There were no corpses, no bloodstains, only twisted and broken pieces of vines. Sensing the aura of the wizard's spells on the few of them, the blood-sucking vines and demonized thorns struggled to move their bodies away from their sides. The activity area of the apprentices at the bottom level was undoubtedly the first battlefield of the battle for fate. Walking through the witchcraft halls, libraries, witchcraft laboratories, living quarters, and winding corridors, traces of witchcraft could be seen everywhere on the floor and walls. Not a single secret room door was intact, and there was not a single area that the awakened witches had not set foot in. Along the way, they also saw the remains of some broken guards in armor, scattered on the ground like garbage, torn apart by someone. The surface of these activated metal armors was dull, and the exposed mechanical joints were also covered in rust, corroded beyond recognition. Due to the lack of maintenance and repair, their battle capabilities had decreased greatly. It was no wonder that they were easily defeated by a group of apprentice witches. Passing through the pitch-black corridors and tunnels, bypassing the messy battlefields, and walking in the eerie darkness for a long time, they finally left the living and learning area of the apprentices and arrived at the middle level of the wizard's pagoda. It had to be said that the situation here was worse than the lower level. Even though the signs of a great battle were obvious in the lower level, most of the wizard facilities and buildings were still intact. As for this place, there were ruins and piles of rubble everywhere. It was already difficult to distinguish the original functions of the buildings. A very dilapidated wizard tower. How much defensive power could this wizard's pagoda still have left? Could this wizard's pagoda still be used without a large-scale repair and resetting of the wizard's spell system? Seeing the scene before them, the few visitors could not help but have all sorts of questions in their hearts. But these questions that involved the secrets of the wizard's pagoda should be buried in their hearts. No one would be stupid enough to ask them directly. Under Alice's lead, the group did not continue to advance upwards, but instead made their way through the piles of rubble. After a few turns, they finally arrived at the remnants of a secret stone room. There were 2 stone platforms placed side by side in the stone room, and 2 naked women were lying on the stone platforms. Apart from that, there was nothing else in the room. On the stone platform on the left lay an exceptionally beautiful young witch. Her skin was soft and white, and her figure was curvaceous. Her breasts weren't big, but they were firm. Just by lying there quietly, it gave people a feeling that it was crystal clear, as if they were admiring a strange beauty of a work of art. On the stone platform on the right was a strong and muscular woman who was not inferior to a man. The reason why he said she was a woman was because of her overly iconic feminine features. If it weren't for them, Grimm would definitely treat her as a man. Strong and bulging muscles like iron ingots, thick veins that stretched like green snakes, and thick and powerful arms and thighs. Grimm swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty. Although he thought that his body was already strong enough, he still felt a sense of inferiority when facing the tough woman in front of him. The 2 witches were Chave and Sophia, who were chosen by fate together with Alice. They lay on the stone platform like dead people, not moving at all. There was no sign of life in their bodies at all. Above their foreheads floated an egg-sized ball of light. Within it, one could vaguely see the souls of Chave and Sophia. Chave. Rena took a step forward and let out a pained sigh. Although she was usually a utilitarian, she still had a trace of true feelings for her biological daughter. Thus, when she saw Chave, whose body and soul had been separated, it was obvious how agitated she was. Sophia's Aunt Gila also took a step forward, and a translucent girl in a red dress floated out of her body. The girl floated near Sophia's body and the ball of light like a ghost, and after checking carefully, she returned to Witch Gila's body. Witch Gila seemed to be communicating with her eyes for a moment, and finally sighed. She turned around and asked, "Lady Alice, What price do I have to pay to revive Sophia? Which Rena, who was standing at the side, also stared at Alice. They were all adult northern witches, and they were well aware of the basic process of the struggle for fate. Alice did not absorb the power of fate in Chave and Sophia's bodies. Instead, she used up her own power of fate to reconstruct their bodies and reform their shattered souls. This would undoubtedly greatly reduce her basic strength. No one would do something so brainless as to harm themselves and benefit others. Thus, at this moment, for the sake of her loved ones, which Hela had to understand Alice's intentions even if she had to lower her stance. After all, the two women were still in a special state where their bodies and souls were separated. Everything was held together by that ball of fate. Without Alice's help, even the Grade 2 Witch of Death Hela did not have the confidence to revive them. After all, the Witches of Death were only good at turning living people into dead people. The two of you should also know how serious my loss is if Chave and Sophia survive. I don't want to say too many hypocritical words. I need your goodwill, and I need them to serve me for 100 years. Alice, who had regained her adult appearance, was now unusually calm and decisive. Her every movement carried a hint of maturity that she did not have in the past. The two Grade 2 witches fell silent at the same time. They silently pondered for a long time, then looked at each other and saw a hint of helplessness in each other's eyes. Even though they were Grade 2 witches, within the Tower of Fate, it was difficult for them to go against a witch leader who had obtained the recognition of the law of fate. Even though she was only Grade 1, but a witch leader was a witch leader. That noble position was there for all to see. If they were to fight, with the support of the power of fate and the protection of the Tower of Fate, the two of them would not have an obvious advantage. This might be the main reason why Alice dared to let them in. Every witch faction had their own wizard tower. Other than the basic functions of the wizard's tower, it also had special effects that other wizards' towers could not replace. Here, the talents of the witch faction could be amplified to the greatest extent. It was also the most important land of inheritance for each faction, and the Tower of Fate was undoubtedly Alice's home ground. Here, the abilities of the witch faction of Fate could be strengthened by 1,000 times, while the abilities of the other witches would be suppressed to the lowest level. So, if they were to really fight, it would be impossible for them to forcefully take Chef and Sophia away. As long as Sophia can be revived, I can agree to any of your conditions. The witch Hela finally spoke. Me too. As long as you can bring Chef back, I can agree to anything, Rena said anxiously. I believe in your promises. Alice nodded. I will treat them as my good sisters. Then, with a wave of Alice's hand, 2 small balls of light wrapped around Chef and Sophia's souls sank down, slowly disappearing into their foreheads. Alice walked forward lightly, using her sharp nails to pierce their skin, drawing a brand of fate with 2 coiled serpents on their foreheads. As soon as the totem was drawn, the brand lit up with a blinding white light. In the blink of an eye, when the white light suddenly disappeared, the foreheads of the 2 women became as clean as before, without a single trace of the brand. From now on, the 2 of them will be the deputy leaders of the witch faction of Fate. Do you think this is appropriate? Alice asked the 2 witches softly. Hearing this, Hela and Rena smiled bitterly in response. Even though this was not what they had originally planned, compared to the worst outcome, this seemed to be a happy ending. This was especially so for the witch Hela. After all, supporting Sophia was her personal idea, while the entire witch faction of Death would choose to support Alice. So, with such an outcome, what other extravagant wishes could she have? Just as the group was deep in thought, Chef and Sophia, who were lying on the stone bed, suddenly moved. Chef's long and clean eyelashes were still fluttering lightly, and she let out a soft moan. On the other hand, the burly Sophia had already sat up with a whoosh. Her bell-like eyes, which were in a daze, first lost focus. Then, her gaze started to focus, and she sized up everything around her in confusion. "Sophia, it's me." The witch Hela took a step forward, revealing herself in front of Sophia, and took off her hood. Grim immediately felt a trace of fear and shuddered. What a terrifying face it was! If one ignored the fine stitches that were as dense as a centipede's legs, as well as the cracks on the face, it could still be considered a beautiful lady's face. Unfortunately, the crisscrossing scratches and the densely packed stitches that were like black centipedes destroyed the beauty of the face to the point where it was impossible to look at it directly. For the first time, Grim hated his overly sensitive vision. In his mind, the AI chip's precise vision had perfectly magnified every detail and every trace of terror on the horrifying face of the witch Hela by 1,000 times. Grim could even see the worms and strange creatures wriggling under the skin through the gaps of the scratches. If not for his powerful mental force suppressing the agitation in his stomach in time, Grim would have made a fool of himself in front of everyone and vomited. "Aunt Hela, why is it you? Didn't I die?" Sophia jumped off the stone platform with a thud, her heavy body causing the secret room to tremble slightly. The berserk witch's physique was indeed unbelievably strong, comparable to those body-tempering sorcerers. She had only fused with her divine soul for a short while, but she could already move freely as if nothing had happened. However, her boorish personality was unbearable. She just stood there with her legs crossed, completely ignoring the fact that she was completely naked. Moreover, there was a mature and fit wizard in the room. At this moment, Chef also forced herself to sit up on the stone platform and looked around blankly. Chapter 380. The process of subduing the two women was exceptionally smooth. After all, both of them were strong competitors who could participate in the battle of destiny, and they had already predicted the possible outcome. To be able to come back from death and continue living, no one would choose to die generously just because of some insignificant restrictions. This could be seen from their performance in the battle of destiny. Even a violent woman like Sophia knew to leave a way out for herself, and cast the life-hiding spell in advance. This showed how much witches valued their lives. Therefore, the 100-year contract and the brand of destiny were not a problem. On the contrary, Chave and Sophia were extremely shocked and confused that Alice did not devour them, but revived them instead. With Alice's strength as a level 1 witch of destiny, it was impossible for her to revive two people who were completely dead. The only reason she could do it was because she borrowed part of the power of destiny that could increase her strength before she leveled up. Reducing her own strength to save two people who were neither enemies nor friends, although there was some friendship from fighting side by side, this was still not a sufficient reason. That was why Chave and Sophia could only become Alice's assistants in their confusion, and also became the deputy leaders of the Witches of Destiny with empty titles. As for the subordinates, the apprentice witches promised by the major witches factions would arrive in a day or two, but before that, sorry to say, in the entire Tower of Destiny, except for the 3 of them, not even a shadow could be found. No, it was not that there was not even a shadow. After carefully inspecting the entire Tower of Destiny, Alice finally found 2 armored guards, 3 shadow steel golems, 2 undead banshees, and 4 mummy elders that were still alive. As for the rest of the tower guards and modified wizard beasts, they had either become rusted pieces of metal, or had been destroyed in the Battle of Destiny. It was extremely difficult to find any of them that could still move. Witch Rena and Witch Hela had already left the Tower of Destiny, and returned to their respective tribes to report to their leaders. The Witches of Death had always been on good terms with the Witches of Destiny, so there was no need to worry about them blaming them. On the other hand, the Witches of Deceit did not know what Rena's return would bring to Alice. After sending Chef and Sophia off to look for their own residences, Alice brought Grim back to the core area of the tower. After experiencing such a brutal battle, in addition to the shocking explosion of the Inferno Tyrant, this place had almost become a wasteland. The floors, walls, ceilings, and all sorts of magic facilities had been destroyed. Without a large-scale restoration, it would be impossible for the Tower of Destiny to display its full strength. Half of the Tower of Destiny will be destroyed after this battle. Alice took the initiative to hold Grimm's hand, bringing him to tour the wizard's pagoda that had just fallen into her hands. The Inferno Tyrant you lent me is gone. The spider puppet beast that you worked so hard to build has also become a pile of scrap metal. Tell me, how do you want me to compensate you for your investment? Grimm didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked around at the mess on the ground and frowned. The entire Tower of Destiny can't be so poor. Could it be that, after the birth of the Destiny Witches in the past, they had to work hard for 100 years to recover? Here, it's all here. Alice took out a thick stack of parchment and stuffed it into Grimm's hands. These are the gifts that the various factions have given back to us in disguise. I've just browsed through it, and it's about 1/8 of all the territories and properties of the Destiny Witches in the past. This is also the sweetness that they've given us. They didn't give us any of it. If we want to take back those properties in the future, we'll have to rely on our strength and fists. Didn't they say that the Northern Witches have always been very united and friendly? Grimm looked through the gift list one by one, his frown deepening. Why are they playing these love-hate games? Humph! Alice snorted coldly. Don't forget, the legacy of the Destiny Witches has been cut off for more than 1,700 years. After such a long time, all the friendships that have accumulated in the past have long disappeared. Do you think that the Witches of Death will spit out the resources that they've swallowed because of this? Just now, they took the initiative to express their support for me, and that's already the greatest favor they can do. Then what are you going to do? Are you going to struggle in these ruins? Without subordinates and resources, I'm afraid you won't be able to repair the Tower of Destiny even if you want to. Let's look around first. Alice also frowned. For the first time, she felt the frustration of being in charge. There are still a few hidden places in the Tower of Destiny that I haven't checked yet. Maybe there'll be some surprises there. I hope so. Grimm could not help but sigh deeply. The Tower of Destiny was the origin wizard tower of the Destiny Witches. Once it was damaged, the amount of resources needed to repair it would definitely be an alarming figure that would make anyone despair. Thinking of this, the two leaders couldn't help but sigh and sigh. As a contracted wizard of the Cerubo family, Grimm had thought that he had some savings. But now that his little bit of wealth had collided with the Tower of Destiny, the top wizard pagoda in the wizard continent, he was afraid that it would be devoured cleanly without even making a sound. The wizard tower had a total of 19 levels, of which there were 15 above ground and 4 underground. The first place they rushed to was the energy room in the second underground level. No matter what kind of wizard's pagoda it was, the energy room would always be the most important place. After all, the energy source and reserves of the entire wizard's pagoda was here. After passing through 21 secret magical doors and protective spells, Alice had to spend an hour and a half to open the last barrier, even though she already had the authority to control the core of the tower. There was a transparent crystal with strange wizard runes floating in front of Alice. It was the crystal that allowed Alice to maintain a close connection with the core of the tower at all times. She recited 317 syllables in a single breath. The cryptic wizard spell incantation was especially hard to pronounce, and she also used 97 wizard hand gestures in different areas of the syllables. When she was done, the meter-thick red ochre door covered in sturdy runes and magic resistance runes shook slightly. Dust fell from the door, and it slowly opened to the side, revealing the energy room of the wizard's pagoda that had been sealed for a long time. The moment the door opened, a dense, almost tangible elemental aura rushed toward them. Alice did not mind it. She was a Destiny Witch, and her talents did not have any preferences. But Grimm was a true fire wizard. When such a dense elemental aura surrounded him, it immediately turned into a sea of fire elemental red. From afar, Grim looked like he had been sealed in a giant ruby, its red color exceptionally beautiful. Alice's action of opening the energy room also attracted Chave and Sophia. The two had just gotten close when they were enveloped tightly by the dense elemental aura, turning them into two new giant gems. Chave was a sapphire, while Sophia was like a diamond. The two greedily breathed in the magical elements flowing in the air, every pore on their bodies opened to the max, trying their best to devour the almost liquid elemental particles. Their bodies had just been constructed, and the amount of wizard energy in their bodies was close to zero. Now that they had such a good opportunity, of course they could not wait to devour everything and get rid of this unbearable hunger. But when the four of them walked into the hall of the energy room, they were immediately stunned by the scene before them. Magical crystals, magical crystals. So many magical crystals. As the top-notch wizard's pagoda in the wizard continent, the hall of the energy room in front of them was large enough, with a surface area of more than 20,000 square meters. Its height was also an astonishing 43 meters. In the center of the hall was a tall magical stone platform, and at the top of the platform was a magical altar that was 3 meters long, 5 meters wide, and 2 meters tall. It was because of this that the wizard's pagoda could constantly absorb drifting magical elements from the void around it, then slowly pour them into the magical pool beneath it. Below the magical altar was a large stone platform with distinct layers, and every stone platform had a giant magical pool dug out. When the magical pool on the top layer was filled with magical energy, it would flow into the magical pool on the bottom layer through a hole dug out beforehand. Like a beautiful blooming flower, the magical altar was the stamen at the center, while the layers of magical pools were like petals that spread out, arranged around the magical stone platform according to an indescribably mysterious rule. With the knowledge and experience of the four of them, they naturally knew that the magical pools on the top layer would always be filled with liquid magical energy, while the pools at the bottom layer would be divided into different elemental pools according to the basic elements such as earth, fire, water, and wind. If the owner of this wizard's pagoda was a fire wizard, then the number of fire elemental pools in the elemental pools would be far greater than the other elements. If the owner of the wizard's pagoda was a death witch, then the number of negative energy pools would definitely be the highest. Only then could the wizard's pagoda create a living environment that was most suitable for the attributes of the owner of the wizard's pagoda. After all, modifying such a large space and changing the originally balanced state of the elements to a state where only one element was the main element would require an alarming amount of elemental energy. Why did so many wizards like to choose geographical environments that were suitable for their attributes when building their wizard's pagoda? Fire wizards liked to build their wizard pagoda in volcanic regions, while ice wizards liked to build their wizard pagoda in the cold, frozen wastelands. This was to reduce the amount of elemental energy required to modify the space, and by saving this energy, it could be turned into visible economic benefits, magical crystals. Thus, when Alice and the other three walked into the hall, the first thing they saw was a small mountain of magical crystals. Chapter 381. How would you react when a mountain-sized mana crystal wafer appeared in front of you? At the very least, Grim was tongue-tied and dumbfounded. He didn't know what to say to express what he was feeling at the moment. It looked like a huge cactus that was growing in a disorderly manner. Huge mana crystal wafers were growing out of the mana pool. The crystal wafers were translucent and radiating dazzling light as they spread in all directions. It could be said that most of the space in the energy room was occupied by these magical crystal clusters. As far as the eye could see, there were crystal clusters everywhere, dazzling mana rainbows and cheerful magic elves everywhere. Magic elves were not natural creatures, nor were they natural monsters. Instead, they were elemental spirits that spontaneously formed when the concentration of magical elements reached a certain level. They looked no different from ordinary elemental fairies, but they were much more advanced than elemental fairies. If elemental fairies were compared to the numerous wild beasts in the natural world, then magic elves would be powerful monsters that were like kings. Although they were few in number, their spiritual origins had been improved qualitatively. When the four of them entered the hall, they saw 6 or 7 magic elves that could be seen with the naked eye. Just as the four of them were intoxicated by the majesty of the magical crystal mountain, a slightly larger magic elf flapped its wings and flew in front of them. "You outsiders, why are you trespassing on our homeland? Get out of here, or we'll attack you." The one who spoke was a beautiful magic elf. She was only the size of a palm and had a slender body, just like a miniature elf. She had a pair of transparent wings that were as thin as cicadas' wings, and she was waving a small magic wand that looked like a matchstick in her hand. Wherever she passed, the spots of mana that were emitted from her body lingered for a long time, outlining a bright path of starlight in the air. Following the thread of the leading magic elf, the other magic elves also surrounded them, flapping their wings and waving their magic wands at Alice and the others. "Big guy, get out of our homeland, get out of here, or I'll turn you into fragrant pigs. No, it's better to turn them into mini-snakes." These magic elves were clearly super talkative. Once they gathered around Linley, they didn't even manage to threaten him before they started quarreling among themselves. Seeing them waving their little fists and trying their best to threaten him, Grim could not help but sigh in his heart. He began to communicate with the AI chip. "AI chip, can you scan the basic model of this creature?" Beep. "Mission established. Beginning scanning." Beep beep beep. "Warning, there is an unknown force field outside the target's body. Normal detection light cannot penetrate it. Recommended to use elemental analysis to detect light wave. However, this method is active detection, so there is a certain chance of being detected by the target. Can't we infer their race from their appearance and movement characteristics?" Beep. "I can't find this type of creature in the database of 1,397,941 creatures. Initial suspicion is that it's a legendary creature. Passive detection means that it's very likely to be a natural spirit born after the density of magical elements reaches a certain threshold. It doesn't belong to the category of natural creatures and magical creatures. Spirit of nature?" Grim muttered to himself. Just as Grim was deep in thought, Sophia, who always believed that fists were bigger than everything else, swayed her sturdy body and stood out. "You bunch of uninvited little fellows, this is our territory. How dare you be so arrogant in our territory? Do you want to eat our fists?" Before she could finish her sentence, Sophia raised her huge fist and shook it at the magic elves. In truth, with the size of Sophia's fist, it was more than enough to kill 2 magic elves. However, it was obvious that her threat had no effect, and her rash actions were seen as an attack by the magic elves. In the next moment, 3 or 4 magic wands were pointed at her. With a clear and melodious shout, 4 rays of green light shot out, hitting Sophia's sturdy body. The rays were thin, and the magical energy they contained was also very weak. However, they strangely ignored Sophia's domineering defensive force field and directly touched her body. There was a soft puff. A wave of green smoke spread out and Sophia disappeared. In her place, a cute pig with a red bow on its tail curled up appeared. When Alice, Grim, and Chave looked at it with cold eyes, the little pig even sneezed and wagged its tail at the 3 of them. "Damn it, it's the damned magic penetration!" When the other party attacked, the other 3 immediately saw the terrifying nature of the magic elves. To sorcerers, witchcraft was an acquired ability formed by the accumulation of a large amount of knowledge on witchcraft, but the magic elves were a type of natural spellcasters. They were originally spirits of nature born from magical energy. Hence, their control of magical energy was not something that sorcerers could borrow. Instead, it was an innate ability that was etched into their souls. Hence, they did not need any incantations or gestures to cast spells. It was as simple as a thought. Furthermore, what was even more terrifying was that every spell they cast had a terrifying magic penetration effect. Even Sophia, who had a beginner-level resistance to magic, could not withstand such a spell and was immediately hit. Sophia, whose body was as sturdy as a human super-muscular man, was turned into a little pig by her opponent without any room for resistance. This humiliation caused the other three to gulp, and they could not help but start to slowly retreat. Even Sophia could not withstand it. Even if they cast all their defensive spells, they would not be able to withstand such a terrifying magic penetration effect. To avoid becoming a laughingstock for 1,000 years, it was better to be safe than sorry. Are you afraid now? A magic elf flapped her wings proudly and flew up and down, dancing excitedly. It's me. It's me. My spell succeeded. The other three magic elves immediately became dejected, and even their wings drooped. It was obvious that the 4 spells had been cast on Sophia at the same time, but the one who had used the pig transformation spell was the one that was effective. To be honest, the magical fairies looked exactly the same. They flew around together, and even Grimm could not tell which one was which just by looking at them. All right, outsider, we will not pursue the matter of you trespassing into our home. The first magic elf that was slightly more mature flew over again. Now, please leave and let our home regain its peace. Grimm and Alice looked at each other, and Alice immediately smiled and stood up. My companion has already said that this is our territory, not your home. As outsiders, you should be the ones to leave, right? Nonsense. Big Guy is lying. Big Guy is so bad, let's turn her into a green frog. The magic elves immediately became angry. They put their hands on their waists and raised their little magic wands, ready to charge forward. Humph, you little fellows. You've taken advantage of my wizard tower for so long, and you still want to act shamelessly. Let me show you who the real master of this place is. Although Alice had returned to her normal body, it was hard to change her habit of being a little girl for a long time. At this moment, she put her hands on her waist and snapped her fingers. A rune quickly flashed on the control crystal of the wizard's pagoda floating in front of her, and a special ripple suddenly came from the depths of the magic crystal cluster in the distance. A moment later, a magic elf flew out in a panic, shouting as she flew, "Oh no! Oh no! The source of magic has been cut off." The magic elves in the area immediately panicked. They could not care less about Alice and the rest, and swarmed into the depths of the crystal cluster mountain. Talk to them, Grimm said, nodding to Alice. They look so innocent. If you talk to them, you might have a few good helpers. Alice turned around and smiled sweetly. Xuefu looked at the two of them in confusion, unable to understand the relationship between the two. Moments later, the group of magic elves rushed out once again in full armor and surrounded Alice menacingly. Speak, you detestable big guy. The leader of the magic elves waved his fists and threatened, "What evil spell did you use to cut off the source of magic? Hurry up and cancel it. Little fellows, don't you know what this place is when you came to settle down here? This is the energy room of my wizard's pagoda, my personal residence and territory. If you want to stay here, the only way is to ask for my permission. If you don't agree, don't blame me for forcing you out." When it came to being unreasonable, it seemed like Alice was better at it than them. The few magic elves immediately gathered together and began to discuss in whispers. As powerful spirits of nature, their intelligence was never low. It was just that they had been isolated from the rest of the world that made them too naive. They could easily tell if Alice's words were true or not. Thus, an even more intense debate unfolded in front of the three of them. At this moment, Sophia was still spinning around on the ground miserably. Although she tried her best to roar and threaten, Grimm had to force himself not to laugh out loud when paired with Little Pig's curvaceous figure and cute face. Chapter 382. In a negotiation like this, the magical elves were clearly in a weaker position. They had no choice. Magical energy was only a means for the wizards to maintain the wizard's pagoda's normal operations. Even if the magical altar was shut down and the wizard's pagoda fell silent, the wizards would not be harmed. But the magical elves had no choice. They were spirits of nature born in a high concentration of magical energy. To them, magical energy was like air to humans. They could never live without it. In fact, if the magical energy in the energy chamber was too low, it would affect them greatly. An ordinary energy chamber of the wizard's pagoda would naturally not give birth to magical elves. That was because the magical crystals formed from liquid magical energy in the magical energy pool would be fished out and stored in the tower's warehouse every once in a while. This was also an indispensable source of income for the wizard's pagoda. It was rare to see a wizard's pagoda like the Tower of Destiny that had been sealed for more than 1,700 years. The accumulation of magical energy over a long period of time, coupled with the fact that the energy chamber was completely sealed, meant that the energy in the magical energy pool became denser and denser. Finally, it was compressed into magical crystal clusters in this special environment, continuously expanding and growing. Even with such a special environment, it took 1,000 years for the first magical elf to be born. In the next few hundred years, new magical elves were born at the rate of one every 100 years. There were 7 magical elves in the energy chamber at the moment. And from the mouth of the magic elf leader, Alice also obtained a piece of news that made her wild with joy. The amount of magical crystals in the energy chamber had reached an astonishing 9 million. But before they could rejoice for a few seconds, the leader of the magical elves brought up some conditions for Alice's service. The first condition was that the total amount of magical crystals in the energy chamber could not be lower than 9 million. After all, magical elves relied on magical energy to survive. If the concentration of magical energy here was too low, it would be difficult for new magical elves to be born at night. But this also meant that the number of magical crystals that Alice could use would be reduced to about 300,000. The second condition was that Alice could only take half of the magical crystals that were converted in the energy chamber every day. Of course, Alice could not agree to this condition. After a tough negotiation, the magical elves had no choice but to lower the limit to 1/3. Currently, the Tower of Destiny was converting around 23 mana crystals per day. Once the tower was fully activated, most of the energy would be used to maintain the daily operation of the tower, and the remaining energy could only be converted into about 12 magical crystals. 8 of them were taken away by Alice, and the other 4 were left behind. Third, enlistment service. Alice and Chave could recruit a magic elf to be their magic partner and help them manage their residence and witchcraft laboratory. However, this service was limited to the Tower of Destiny, and the magical elves would never step out of the wizard's tower. As for Grimm and Sophia, they were not chosen by the magic elves and were regrettably excluded from the recruitment list. Thus, after Alice and Chave finished negotiating with the other party, they each chose a magic elf as their magic partner and signed an equal contract. For the sake of this contract, the 2 of them had to pay 2 magical crystals each day as a recruitment fee, and they couldn't force the magic elves to do anything against their will. After Alice was successfully summoned, a petite and cute magic elf sat on her shoulder and snuggled into her ear, beginning to communicate with her intimately. Through the information that Alice passed to him, Grimm also gained some information about the magic elves. Magic elves were naturally born magical spirit. They had no gender and had pure elemental bodies. Their basic abilities were similar to official wizards. Their talent spells included disrupting magic barrier, rapid mana recovery, deep meditation, physical strength recovery, and other support spells. These spells could not only be used on themselves, but could also be used on others. They could double the mana recovery, physical strength recovery, and directly enter deep meditation. They were the magic servants that experienced spellcasters needed. Coupled with their long lifespans and photographic memory, they could even serve a wizard family for thousands of years. Thus, they were definitely the best magic partners for a wizard. However, the conditions for the birth of magic elves were too harsh, and their choice of partners was even more troublesome. Thus, if they could not reach an agreement with them, they would rather destroy themselves than be restricted by others. A creed which, like Sophia, obviously did not fit their aesthetic standards, and Grimm was also rejected by them because of his male identity. As for the reason, no one knew. With such a contract, Alice was basically renting the entire energy room to these magic elves. Even if she wanted to visit in the future, she would have to ask for their permission in advance. Although this seemed a little unfair, when she thought about the help these magic elves could provide to the future of fate, Alice accepted it. Not only did magic elves have no gender, but they also did not have the concept of you and me, so they generally did not have names. However, in order to distinguish between them, Alice still named the magic elf she recruited Helen, and the one Chave recruited was called Hannah. The two unnamed magic elves immediately acted like little girls who had just gotten their favorite toys, and hurriedly ran to show off to their friends. This time, all the magic elves were in an uproar. They all ran to Alice and pestered her to give them names. Alice was dizzy from being pestered by them, and could only randomly call them Anna, Ellie, and Eve before she satisfied each of their wishes. Unexpectedly, this move actually made Alice gain the favor of this group of magic elves in advance, and they volunteered to help Alice clean up this Magus tower that had been abandoned for a long time. As soon as Alice nodded, this group of magic elves, who were friendly with each other, formed a small team and flapped their wings as they rushed out of the energy room. The 6 magic elves were like 6 little fairies from a sweet dream, sprinkling starlight all the way as they quickly flew along the dark old passage. As they flew, they casually waved their magic wands at places that they did not like. With a tap of the magic wand, the lights on the walls that had lost their effectiveness lit up once again, a streak of starlight scattered over, and the dust on the floor rustled and flew into the distance. The magic vines that grew haphazardly on the walls and the broken spider webs in the corners were also swept away by the magic storm. As for the secret doors and buildings that had been destroyed during the Battle of Fate, they were miraculously restored after the magic elves flew past. Alice and the others left the energy room and walked all the way up. All the passages were shining brightly, all the floors were as clean as new, and all the secret doors and facilities had basically been restored to normal. These magic elves seemed to have magical hands that could turn stone into gold. Wherever they went, the dust and debris that had accumulated for thousands of years were swept out of the tower. Even the areas that were covered by magic vines and enchanted thorns were cleaned up, revealing their original appearance. Under the control of their magical means, the rotten and collapsed wooden shelves and bookcases in the library were restored to their original state. Books, scrolls, drawings, and secret books covered in dust also flew back to their original positions. Almost in an instant, a library that was open to apprentice witches was restored. After cleaning up the place, the magic elves quickly flew out again and directly flew to the witchcraft laboratory. Looking at their diligent figures from afar, Alice and the others could not help but be speechless. There were specializations in every field. No wonder magic elves were known as the world's best magic housekeepers and magic companions. This could be seen without a doubt from this point. Even though it would be difficult to use the 9 million magic crystals in order to get them, the 4 of them still felt that it was worth it. But Sophia, who was despised by the magic elves, was getting more and more annoyed, her entire face turning black. Looking at the group of bean-sprout-like creatures flying around her, the anger in her heart grew stronger and stronger. She, a berserk witch with a body that could resist magic, had actually been turned into a magic elf. Thinking of that scene, the anger in Sophia's heart burned so fiercely that she wanted to go berserk and smash everything in front of her into pieces. Taking the opportunity while the magic elves were busy cleaning up the first level of the wizard's pagoda, Alice pulled Chef and Sophia to the side and began a heart-to-heart conversation. You may have a family or relatives behind you. I can understand that. But now you're part of the Destiny Witches, Alice said patiently. As sisters, I will not do anything that will make things difficult for you, but you must also manage your relationships well. Since Alice had made things clear, Chef and Sophia naturally knew how to choose. As vice leaders, they naturally had to shoulder the mission of bringing the Destiny Witches back to prominence. After obtaining the control rights of the tower from Alice, the three of them gathered together for a discussion and assigned the most urgent tasks to each of them. Alice focused on understanding the structure and secrets of the tower, and also calculated the wizard facilities that could not be used after the wizard's pagoda was destroyed, to see if they could be repaired. Chef was in charge of cleaning up the storerooms and storage rooms on the bottom level, trying to find some usable materials and resources. Even though the probability was low, the stone and magical metals used to repair the tower should not have been eroded by the passage of time. And these were all urgently needed. As Alice's ally, Grimm naturally had to stay behind to help. The knowledge he had just grasped about the magic colossus constructs was immediately put to use. The magic elves gathered the remains of the magic colossus constructs from all over the tower and sent them to a hall, while Grimm worked day and night to repair and piece together some usable tower puppets. After all, the magic elves could only clean up the tower, or use magic tricks to repair some ordinary items. They could not do anything about the wizard artifacts and wizard facilities. Every time Grimm repaired a tower puppet, it meant that he had free labor. Cleaning up the terrifying battle ruins on the top level of the wizard's pagoda could not be done without them. As for Sophia, she went to the energy room to retrieve 100,000 magic crystals and hurriedly left the tower. In at most 2 days, a large number of apprentice witches would arrive at the Tower of Destiny. Their arrival meant that the tower would have to start operating immediately, providing for the hundreds of people's basic needs, such as living, learning, and training. Wizards could directly drink the elemental water extracted from the water elemental world, but the apprentice witches did not have this ability. Long-term consumption of elemental water could easily cause an imbalance in the elements in their bodies. Thus, be it food, water, wizard ingredients, or other resources, the Tower of Destiny needed a large replenishment. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.